Good evening, council, staff, members of the public. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? I have councillors Garwood and Alexander at the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater, October 16th, 2024, come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Please join me in the singing of the national anthem.
Canada,
Our home and native land, true patriot love, in all of us commend. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Councillor, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Councillor Alexander?
Sorry, Mayor Coughlin. Item 8.8, the student grid wage. My son has been an employee, a summer employee of this township for the past 2 years, so probably not appropriate that I vote on the matter.
Not seeing anything further. If you do find yourself in that situation at that time, at this time, I'll turn to Deputy Clerk Marshall. Have there any submissions for question period?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There have been no question period submissions for tonight's meeting.
And at this time, I will turn to members of the public. If there's anyone wishing to pose or ask a question of council, at this time, please come forward. Not seeing any. We will now move on to our minutes of council. May I have a mover and seconder for the minutes, please? Councillor Moore and Councillor Fisher, that the minutes of council listed herein be approved as presented. Minutes of the regular meeting of council of October 2nd, 2024, minutes of the special meeting of council October 2nd, 2024, and minutes of the special meeting of council closed session October 2nd, 2024. Are there any questions or comments on these minutes? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder for the option reports, please? Councillors Thompson and Moore, that the report, this is not the action reports. My apologies, council. We are moving on to the action report, and this is 7.1 for the water connection fees for 8 Albert Street. And the motion before us is that council, the report from the Directors of Planning and Development and Finance regarding water connection fees at 8 Albert Street West, dated October 16th, 2024, be received, and that option 1, that council authorize the cost to install the water line service to the property at 8 Albert Street West in the amount of $8,178, excluding HST, be funded from the tax rate stabilization reserve, or option 2, that council endorse a standardized procedure that the owner of 8 Albert Street West be responsible for the cost to install the water service to the property at 8 Albert Street West along the cost stipulated in the fees and charges bylaw. And at this time, we will open it up on the floor for any comments or questions. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Reading the report, I notice here option 1 talks about it. If it were to be selecting option 1, it should not be coming from the tax rate stabilization reserve. It's water, wastewater is where it maybe should be coming from. Those who utilize the service pay for the service. However, just reading the report, I noticed that it revolves around a word that says available, and I struggle with that. I wouldn't just automatically assume that because something is available that it's automatically going to be provided. Available does not mean included, in my opinion. And in addition to that, the DCs that are payable in that particular area are different from DCs paid in other areas because there are certain amenities and services that are not provided and they have to be paid for. For myself, I will be voting for option 2. We've been here before where there's been folks with water meter issues and things like that. And I don't think that the other water and wastewater residents who have paid their fair share should be basically paying for someone else's hookup. So that's my position. I would prefer option 2.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cabral. Any other questions? Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to, I believe, Director Herron, but please redirect if necessary. From reading the report, I see, I think it's the first page at the bottom. It speaks to in response to the property owner's concerns and as a result of the internal review of each of his concerns, staff is in the process of adopting several changes to the township's approval process, including amending the wording and conditions of consent to sever, et cetera. Can you speak to, just at a high level, as to what those changes will look like, understanding that if changes are being made to a certain extent, that puts the onus on the municipality. If we feel that there was something done wrong that resulted in amendments moving forward to provide better service to our residents, I look at this as almost as an admission that something was incorrect in the first place. So can you just speak to that, please?
Director Herron.
Thank you, Your Worship. In response to the Councillor Garwood's question, municipalities in the service delivery are held to a higher standard. We just are, and so in reviewing the concerns that were raised by the individual, we decided to look at it very honestly and openly. And in the first issue, in terms of the wording that was provided, staff interpreted it that yes, it could have been misinterpreted that the water service was provided from the main line to the property line. That wasn't the case. It wasn't the intent of what staff meant to describe to the applicant. So we felt it was a fair interpretation on the applicant's part that water was there to the property line when the applicant proceeded with the building permit. So with that, we learned it was an opportunity for staff to improve the service we provide, and we did. So we've amended the recommendations to the Committee of Adjustment in creating lots that as a condition of creating the lot, the proponent must install the water line to the property line, and only then would the lot be created. So it's a similar standard that we do for regular plans of subdivision where there's 30 or 60 or 200 homes. The developer is not allowed to create the lot until services are installed, including water and sewer. So we're simply applying what's already applied in other lot creation processes. So it was an opportunity for us to, in a regular way of saying it, up our game in how we provide services to the public. There were some other concerns. I think there were 3 others that in the estimate for the cost, there was a fee included in that estimate that shouldn't have been there. And that was another thing that, in rendering the concern back to the township, the proponent was quite correct. So again, it was a lesson in being accurate in the information that we provide. There were a few other concerns. One was the dimension of the water pipe size, which the township provided the correct information to begin with, and the assertion that development charges paid for, and it's the township's responsibility to install the water line, which of course are not the case, and the report does explain that. So on the balance of the concerns, two of the concerns were valid, two of the concerns not as valid, but nonetheless, the township staff looked at it and thought, we can improve what we do based on what we see here, and we did that. So that's what we have before us tonight.
Follow on, Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and thank you, Director Herron. I appreciate the overview. And part of my follow-up was going to be asking about the other concerns. So you beat me to it. So thank you on that. And I agree. I think it's important that we do learn from our mistakes. I also think it's easy for us to sit up here and say that when we're not the ones that experience the frustration and the concern and the challenges that this resident had. I think it's also important to mention and remember, we're also not speaking about a multi-million-dollar developer here. We're speaking about an individual who is looking or has built a home in our municipality and is choosing Springwater, I believe it's Hillsdale to be specific, as home. So that's also something to look at. Again, I look at this as I'm happy to see that we are going to be making changes moving forward to ensure that we are upping our game and our level of service continues to rise in regards to supporting residents building homes. But I'm more leaning towards option number one. I see the validity in regards to the residents' concerns, and I'm happy to see that we are adopting some of those changes. I also believe this would not be in front of this council if staff did not believe that there was an issue here. Staff could have dealt with this and told the resident that it is what it is and move forward, but this is coming forward to this table for a conversation and for a discussion. So personally, I would like to see option one, and I will wait for council to have a conversation, but I would like to table that at some time.
Thank you for that. And before I do go to Councillor Thompson, I think too in suggesting learning from a mistake, but I think in this case it's interpretation and to ensure that our wording and our bylaws and our communication to residents doesn't allow for interpretation. It's quite difficult because people will interpret things to their best of their ability at any time. So I would agree that with Deputy Cabral in that available does not mean inclusive of that. So I'll leave it at that. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, through the chair to Director Herron. So I'm interested in following up on Deputy Mayor Cabral's comment about where the funds should come from if we do this. He mentioned they should come from the water charges. Would that be a possibility?
I might at this, Director Bedard.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Councillor Thompson. That would be a possibility. We will take direction from council with respect to funding. Just to build on that, when looking at the property itself, it's not serviced with wastewater. So this property would not be contributing to the wastewater reserve once part of the system.
Follow on.
And just, is there a reason why there wasn't an option 3 where it would be a shared cost, where maybe the resident would pay half and the township would pay half?
I will turn to Director Herron for that.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Councillor Thompson. It simply wasn't one of the considerations that staff placed in the report. It was the approach was either or, and at this point, those are the options that staff are comfortable with. If we're willing to take direction from council, if council has a different take on it.
Yeah. CEO Schmidt.
For standing with the mic, sorry. Thank you, Mayor Collin. Through you to members of council. I would just also like to say that, further to Director Herron's comments, precedent has already been set in municipality. We have other residents in Heatherwood Court, for example, in Midhurst, where essentially services were provided similarly. After the subdivision was built, there were some lots that weren't serviced. And essentially option 2 was the option that was provided to those individuals, which essentially was the cost was borne by the property owner, not the township. And I get the comment from Councillor Garwood about water available, and I don't agree with the comment of mistake. I would suggest that that's the comment that was provided to the individual. and further dialogue was provided to the individual afterwards. And again, precedent has already been set in municipality whereby property owners, private property owners such as this, have had to pay for the full cost to service the property. If I can, your comment about an error or mistake with regards to the min fee, maybe I can accept that piece.
I have Councillor Alexander and Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So first, just a general comment, and I think I was surprised to see this on here just in that it is in my ward and I had no idea it was an issue or occurring. And I certainly understand that residents often reach out to staff and not counselors, and you certainly don't need to bring everything to our attention. But if it is going to be an agenda in the future, I would love a heads up, just a general comment. I would agree. I think this is a misinterpretation. I commend Director Heron on, improving the process. I think there's always room for improvement when there are misinterpretations. And I think it's good for us to be open to, making things better and more clear to our residents. My issue with option one is I think we are then setting a very dangerous precedent moving forward in that anytime there is a type of misinterpretation, we are opening ourselves up to people coming, looking for it to be paid by the township. Again, I think, unfortunately, after reading through this, and this isn't my ward, I feel that it was a misinterpretation. They potentially should have asked the questions a bit more thoroughly before moving ahead. So unfortunately, I think I would have to go with option two on this one.
Thank you. And Councillor Alexander, I will bear the responsibility for that. The resident had reached out to myself. I have been working with and dealing with for quite some time with that. So it is on me as much as it is staff for not relaying that to you. Councillor Fisher?
Just through you to CAO Schmidt, you mentioned the homes on Heatherwood being tied in afterwards. Around what time period was this?
CAO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through to Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fisher, I would say, I don't have the exact dates, but I would say probably within the last 5 years. There was a couple of properties there towards the southern portion of Heatherwood that had recently been developed. And I think there was 2 possibly, if I recall, that were in a similar situation.
Follow on?
Yeah, so I agree with CAO Schmidt, that's a good example, and it's within the last 5 years. That's recent memory. So I really do feel that precedent has been set. And I also think that to Councillor Alexander's point, to change that now would be precedent setting. So I can't go with number one.
Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I would suspect that this has come up a number of times prior to, and it's not been an issue. Folks have read it. They've, understood what the words mean, and it's a misinterpretation, not necessarily on our part, but since that misinterpretation did occur, I can certainly see staff re-looking at it to maybe clarify it so that that never happened again. However, I also don't want to simply assume that this is a new resident coming to Springwater Township that has got himself a lot and is building a home. It could very well be a small developer of custom homes who may be very well aware of what the process is and what's going on, and maybe saw this as an opportunity for a loophole. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that I don't know who the individual is who's actually building this home. So I don't want to make the assumption that it's a private homeowner. It could very well be a small custom home builder that is a developer, and that's how they make their living. So I'm sticking with option 2. That's what everybody else ends up having to pay. And I don't think it's fair to put that burden on either taxpayers or the other users of the water and wastewater system.
Not seeing anything further from council at this time. I did have Deputy Cabral who did go first. I've had 2 options put forward tonight, Councillor Garwood and Councillor Deputy Cabral. So maybe I will turn to and you can shake your head at me if local ward councillor, if not, but if you would like to, as the local ward council, to put an option forward, or I can return to the first speaker for an option to be put forward.
I'm happy to put option 2 forward because I stated that's what I would support.
So I have option 2 being put forward by Councillor Alexander and seconded by Councillor Fisher. Councillor, are there any further discussion or comments? Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Can you or the clerk please read out what option 2 is?
Option 2, that council endorse the standardized procedure that the owner of 8 Albert Street, and I am inserting west, be responsible for the cost to install the water service to the property at 8 Albert Street West along with the cost stipulated within the fees and charges bylaw. Anything further at this time, council? All those in favor of option 2? And that has carried. Council, at this time, we will now move on to our action reports. We will be pulling 8.8 to be dealt with separately. I will move now through, may I have a mover and seconder to have these on the floor, please? Councillors Moore and Thompson, that action reports item 8.2 through 8.13 be received, and that the recommendations contained therein be approved as presented. 8.2 is the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund, intake 2. 8.3, Ontario Sports and Recreation Infrastructure Fund, stream 1 application. 8.4, Anton Mills Community Center upgrades. 8.5, fees and charges, recreation parks and facilities user fees. 8.6, waiving of fees and charges for rental space by service clubs. 8.7, asset management plan. 8.8, student wage grid. 8.9, 2025 council meeting schedule. 8.10, group benefits program renewal. 8.11, amendment to development charges bylaw. 8.12, the Environmental Registry of Ontario posting 199210 proposed amendment for additional residential units. 8.13, the award of GPO 2024-42 RFP Community Hub and Archaeological and Engineering Services Project. So council, at this time, I will ask if there are any to be pulled to be dealt with separately. Councillor Alexander has declared conflict on 8.8. Any in addition to that? Councillor Thompson.
8.4.
Councillor Fisher.
8.6 and 8.13.
At this time, council, I have 8.4, 8.6, 8.8, and 8.13. Councillor Garwood.
8.5.
Council, at this time, we do have our consent agenda would then be inclusive of 8.2, 8.3, 8.7, 8.9, 8.10, 11, and 12. Is there any of those council wishes to have pulled to be dealt with separately? Any comments on those remaining? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. At this time, we'll move to 8.4, the Anton Mills Community Center upgrades. And I will turn to Councillor Thompson, and I will need a mover and seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Fisher. And that the report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Facilities regarding the Anton Mills Community Center renovations dated October 16th, 2024 be received, and that council directs staff to proceed with obtaining quotes for the following works at the Anton Mills Community Center: removal of the drop ceiling, repair from the former wood ceiling, painting for the wood ceiling, electrical and lighting rework, attic insulation, and report back to council. And that council directs staff to proceed with an investigation of the bell tower construction and installation specifications and general condition of the assessment using the consultant engineering firm with the expense not to exceed $2,500 without council approval. And that council directs staff to include luxury vinyl plank flooring for the Anton Mills Community Center for the consideration in the 2025 budget. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through the chair to Director Culver, just a couple of things that we would like to see in this, when it comes to the ceiling, I know you've given a range of 30,000 to 144,000. I can't see 144,000 being a good investment to that building. So we'd also like to add to this, just to get a price on keeping the flat ceiling as just doing a covering over the flat ceiling, and to see how that cost effective that would be. Also, somewhere we'd like to see in the ceiling quote, getting rid of the cluster fly infestation that seems to plague the people that use this hall. And finally, during this process, if you could investigate as well if there's any grants or funding available, as well as maybe any private funding of maybe a local business that would like to assist with this as well. Thank you.
I will turn now to our manager, to our director, to see if there's redirection required if there is a formal amendment required, or if this was just notes taken.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I understand the direction from the counselor, so I think we can, when we do the quote for the flat ceiling, it exists, and essentially we're looking at a fascia treatment. I think I can describe that adequately to get a quote to bring back to council. And the other items are very doable.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you. Through Mayor Coughlin to Mr. Culver or CAO Schmidt. We already have a pest control company that goes around to the halls. Can we not just ask them, please, to take care of the flies, or the cluster fly problem? Because that just made me itch.
CAO Schmidt, or I will turn to Manager Dean.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through yourself to Councillor Moore. So we do have a pest control company. They did do a spraying in the spring. Sorry, get my bearings here on dates. And they will be doing a spraying again in the next couple of weeks for flies in the building. So there was, when they went up there for the first spraying, we did find some holes that needed to be patched. So those were patched as well. So the flies or pests are on our regular work plan.
Anything further, council, at this time? Councillor Fisher?
Good question, through to maybe Councillor Thompson. When you say a flat ceiling, like a drywalled ceiling versus a tongue and groove, I think I saw in the pictures.
Councillor Thompson.
Through the chair to Councillor Fisher, I understand that there's applications where they could just leave the drop ceiling in and cover it with some kind of a covering or a fascia that would really improve the look, but be very cost effective.
Director?
Through you, Mayor, actually, and in response to Councillor Thompson, that's not what I understood, and I want to make sure that as we go about getting the quotes, I don't know how possible that is in a commercial application. I actually believe, just from experience, that the drop ceiling would need to be removed. A new sort of drop ceiling buffer would need to be installed, and then that would be a new tongue and groove flat ceiling added. It's a complicated idea in our application, so I just want to be clear that I'll explore all the options and appreciate that a bit of clarity for what you were intending. But I just also want to set up for some expectations that perhaps I'll be coming back with something that's not exactly what you've described, because I'm not sure it's possible in our application, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Director Calvert, and I think too that it will be coming back to council with the various options. So, Councillor Fisher.
I too, I'd like to see quotes for the tongue and groove, like per square foot. So I've been in the building, and I think it's a little bit more period correct, if you will, and it looks better. In my experience, sometimes it's not that much more expensive, actually, by the time you end up removing stuff and doing stuff. So 144 grand seems incredibly high, but I'm sure we could find it to be reasonable.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and more of just a comment. Of course, I've spoken about this item in the past, but the Cultural and Heritage Advisory Committee is quite eager about this project. has fully endorsed it in the past and continues to do so. So I truly hope that council supports this as we move forward. And I think Councillor Fisher is correct, right? It is one of those buildings that is very specific to its time, and it is one of our few heritage listed properties within the municipality. So we're lucky to have this space.
Not seeing anything further, council, all those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to 8.5, our fees and charges bylaw. May I have a mover and seconder, please? I have Councillor Moore and Councillor Thompson, that the report from the Director of Recreations, Parks and Facilities regarding the fees and charges, recreation, parks and facilities user fees dated October 16th, 2024 be received, and that council approved the fees and charges, recreation, parks and facilities as approved in Appendix A, and that Schedule F of Bylaw 2024-046 be repealed and replaced with Appendix A, and that staff develop a Parks and Recreation user fee guideline policy with input from user groups, residents, and stakeholders. And at this time, council, I can open it up for questions. Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to either Director Culver or Manager Dean, understanding that this report and really this entire matter around fees and charges for recreation has been a multi-year discussion. Many discussions and concerns from residents and conversations. So maybe just a general overview as to how we got to where we are today. Understanding the report is very inclusive of details, but not every member of the public is going to read that. Not to put you on the spot, but if we can just provide a bit of a summary, and then I have a few follow-up questions.
Director Culver.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I arrived a little bit after the initiation of the program that's led us to here, so I'll do my best and lean on Manager Dean for some help as needed. In a nutshell, based on a reading of the consultant's report delivered back in 2022, there was a process undertaken to assess what full cost recovery might look like relative to user fees across the spectrum of township services. At the conclusion or latter part of that process, I think, and even within the report itself, there is some identification that recreation fees are irregular to other fees in other departments of the organization, and that there would be some there's a good idea to have staff review in the context of what the market will bear as it turns, to use a term. So based on what I understood council direction to be, we conducted an assessment of kind of the market and where we sit in the market relative to other municipalities, and had dialogue with user groups over time. And even conducted an open house to try and just determine where the user groups might fall in terms of concern about the rates. So the report that you see in front of you is really based on an idea that it's typical for a municipality to have and provide services that are subsidized in the recreation sector, with the idea of generating and creating a community of well-being and a community of activity and health. And so with that in mind, and the market comparison in hand, we're recommending that in large part for the larger components of that fee schedule, that they remain static for 1 year. While we do more work on a policy that we were unable to get to prior to this meeting, and return back in time for budget to determine if adjustments need to be made going forward at that point.
Thank you for that. And I'm just going to ask, there might be an electronic device close, whether it's a laptop or, thank you. Sometimes it interferes with it's temperamental on the best of times. So follow on Councillor Garwood or Deputy Cabral? Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I guess my take on it was that we had a consultant come forward and provide us with with information and a fee structure that council thought was okay at the time, and we approved it. And after approving it, there was some vocal groups that were the users, and I can understand, nobody wants to pay more. Everybody wants to pay less. However, we also have to keep in mind that there's a number of taxpayers out there who do not utilize many of our facilities or our recreational opportunities. And of course, that's by choice. But I think the idea was that we were going to waive and freeze for a year, and we're like into year 2. So that puts us, 3 years behind the 8 ball if we wait until next year in order to do this. So I would really like, to see staff expedite this. And I also would like to see some type of outside information come forward, because I think if we simply do it internally, we're going to be looking at it from possibly just one scope. And we have to be very, very objective about what we do. And the reason for that is, as I said, there are folks out there who don't use these recreational facilities, yet we're still paying into it. And the whole idea is to try and make it reasonable for the users, but also bring some dollars back into the coffers to help offset the cost, in particular for some of our more expensive facilities. So those would be kind of my concerns, would be to make sure that we do have opportunity to get this done quicker rather than, keep dragging our feet. We have other municipalities right now that are changing their own fee structure. So what we have now is going to be outdated very quickly. And we also have municipalities that are looking at charging outside user fees. Don't know how that's going to pan out either. Might be something to explore, would be to work with the other municipalities on some of our more, let's say, pressing or not pressing, larger groups, larger facilities like our arena, and see whether or not we might be able to work with our neighboring municipalities to come up with more of a standardized platform that takes everybody's concerns into account, so that we're not being forced to subsidize ours by a higher rate simply because one of our neighbors doesn't have the same operational costs that we do. So I just hope that's all taken into consideration, that we can do this quicker rather than not. We're into year 2 as it is right now with frozen rates.
Thank you. And maybe I'll turn to Manager Dean, if not Director Culver. So most recently, the North Simcoe area, the North Simcoe heads of council have gone through some realignment of their user fees and their contribution to neighboring municipalities. Understanding that a neighboring township used to contribute $7,500 to for those of their residents who utilized different facilities within this, and they since then pulled back on that. Understanding that many municipalities are looking within. I will say there used to be a more shared approach to recreation, but understanding the constraints and needs to focus on what we can provide to our own residents. Could you just confirm that we have a recent shortcoming, or that a neighboring municipality did in fact pull out on a joint service agreement?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through yourself and to the rest of council. That is correct. As of this year, so the 2024-2025 season, as it falls in the arena, we do have a neighboring municipality that is no longer paying a fee that they used to pay to the arena.
Thank you for that. And I guess that sparks for myself in speaking with other members of council regarding this issue, and understanding that appreciating everyone's different assessment of what recreation is to our residents and as a whole. It's part of our strategic plan endorsed by council that we do want to create healthy, active communities and provide opportunities, whether it's our trails, our halls, our outdoor ice rinks, whatever it is, we try and provide many different amenities. But at the same time, we want to keep our user rates low enough that we're not, I don't want to say forcing, but encouraging our active user groups to go elsewhere to receive that. So I'm going to, again, look to either Director Culver or Manager Dean. And I will pull back once again to our agreement with the city of Barrie, where we annually pay money to the city of Barrie for an agreement, much like we had with the neighboring municipality who chose to revert and keep that money to themselves to reinvest in themselves. And what could it potentially look like if we did not embark on that 100 grand a year that we provide to the city of Barrie, and we were to apply that to our own recreation fees, and how could that help us? Whether you choose the word subsidize or invest, how could that help us here in Springwater?
Through your worship, I'll take a stab. So I think it's a decision of impacts. The fee that we pay to Barrie offsets some of the non-Barrie resident access to the facilities like their pool in North Barrie, South Barrie, and so, you know, certainly there would be an impact on those residents. We struggled to get a number in terms of, you know, what that impact would look like. But that would be sort of the net impact. So those residents would be paying a non-Barrie resident fee to use those services if we withdrew from that contract or from that agreement. Could that fund be used as, I mean, certainly any income coming into the recreation sector is going to be helpful. So it could be utilized in terms of some form of stabilization of rates. But I would actually, you know, appreciate if council gave us the opportunity to take it away and maybe review the concept and come back with something that might be a little better thought out.
And I apologize for putting you on the spot for that, but Councillor Fisher?
Just a comment on the agreement we have with Barrie. For $100,000, I think it's sub 100,000. I believe Springwater residents, my family included, gets a lot of benefit. The facilities that we use on a almost nightly basis with 3 children are phenomenal. And I don't think that, I don't use the term reinvest. If we were to take it back and reinvest it, you know, for $100,000, we couldn't achieve anywhere close to that. So I think it's money well spent, and I would never like to see that go away. So that's my comment on that.
Thank you. And the intention for this is, I understand that some members of council want to see recreation be cost recovery or more towards cost recovery. And while there are members of Springwater Township, and while we've been asking the city of Barrie for 10 years to provide us with the number of people that utilize that, it to me, it's just curious. What would that look like if it was to be pulled back, and how could that offset some of the reinvestment in ourselves rather than neighboring municipalities? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to CAO Schmidt. I'm sure we had those numbers when we looked at this about a year ago. And after much persistence, we did get some solid information from the city of Barrie about users, maybe not so much about the fees, but the number of users that were headed their way for recreation. And it was substantial. It was a very large number of people. And you could maybe even find that number, I'm not sure, more easily than I can. But what the question I have within the report is that it says $680,000 for direct costs for the Unveil Arena and $406,000 from user fees. So a 40% subsidy. And what you're asking for is a 25% subsidy. So I'd like to know what that number looks like. So the 15%, and I'm not a good accountant, but if you could let me know sort of what in dollars that looks like, that you would be, you know, seeking that improvement and putting that on the floor. At least then our user groups would know what to expect. And I'm thinking particularly of hockey.
Director Culver?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not caught up to the question, I'm afraid. I apologize. I'm a little slow tonight, but if I could ask for a clarification of the question, and I just need to that, and I can maybe try and help.
Councillor Moore?
Oh, thank you. in the report, page 4, where it speaks to recommendations, so it's just above that, it speaks to the 2023 year budget. The Elm Bell Arena expenses were $680,000 of direct costs, and then approximately $406,000 came in with user fees. And you're saying the estimated subsidy rate of 40.3%, where that falls onto the municipality. And then the recommendation is for a subsidy rate of less than 25%. So there's 15% difference. What I'm asking is, what does that look like to the user if this is approved, and particularly related to hockey? Because I think they were the loudest when we talked about this last time, and I think that they're the biggest impact in that area. Director?
Through your worship, I'm actually not sure that the 25% isn't a typo because I'm struggling a little bit with recalling where that comes from, because we actually recommended a freeze on the major rates. So it wouldn't be 25%, it would be a continuation of the current.
I'm curious, Director Culver, was it an increase of 25%?
Yeah, I apologize. I actually am not clear on that number. I know exactly what I meant when I wrote 40.3%. But honestly, I'm not 100% sure that isn't a typo, because I'm not sure what the basis of that was. It's not found, it doesn't have a foundation elsewhere, which it normally would have when I write a report. So I apologize for that.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you. I'm fine if you can send me an email or send council an email after, once you sort that out.
Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just realigning a bit over to the report and the fact that we are highlighting community hall fees. I do want to say specifically, I do have a bit of concern in regards to raising. I believe it's roughly 10%. I think that's what I figured from the calculation. Maybe it's not across the board, but just looking down the proposed 2025 fees. Understanding that, yes, things are getting more expensive, and yes, fees are going to continue to go up. But in turn, what I have heard consistently this term has been many of our halls are underutilized. Maybe they're well utilized by our community groups that are accessing the space for free, but those that are paying for the space maybe aren't. It's not utilized as often in that purpose. I'm going to use what I'm familiar with. So apologies if I'm just focusing on Elmvale facilities here, but I look at the Elmvale Community Hall, for example. Right now, the weekend, Friday to Sunday per day rate is $450. The proposed is to go up to $495, so it's a $45 increase. One of the number one things I've heard so far this term, especially whether it be at the community recreation table or whatnot, is that that rate is already too expensive for many groups that might not qualify for free space, or just for those that are looking to book the space specifically. So then I guess, my question as a whole, and it does stem off to what Mayor Coughlin had noted earlier on in regards to healthy and active communities, is that this council's focus on a healthy and active community or a cost recovery? Because I see them as really two different sides of the same coin. Understanding that, yes, to an extent, we need to bring money back in. And yes, the users have traditionally been paying for the space, but I also see increasing our community halls also affects other areas than just booking a community hall for an event. I see that directly increasing the cost on planned programming and recreation in the community. So for instance, I think of someone, if we bring in an external contractor, which I know some of our recreation partners are, seeing as we maybe don't have the staffing complement to offer them ourselves, if that individual is coming in, and that charge is being put back onto the resident, which often it is. If this council approves an increased cost to those halls that are well utilized for recreation purposes, I'm thinking like a Zumba class or a workout class, whatever it is on an evening, that then becomes more expensive for that individual. And therefore I see that cost going back onto the end user, which is again, our residents, and making it potentially less accessible for those individuals. Understanding that I'm consistently inundated with questions on we want more programming, we want more option, we want them closer to home. And of course, those are all wants, but we also know from the report that Director Culver wrote, which I thought was very well done, speaks to the fact that there are significant benefits aside from financials in regards to investing into a healthy and active community. And then secondary to that, the projected revenues from raised fees within the facilities, so the community halls specifically section of Schedule F is approximately $6,550. So yes, we are talking $6,500 in increased fees, but I could potentially see that increase of $6,500 negatively impacting the community to an even greater extent in regards to limiting access to our various different spaces. I know later on the agenda, there is a item to speak to waiving fees for service clubs, which I think is fantastic. But again, I do see this as a potential issue. I know we're not talking about necessarily raising fees for, ice time or anything along those lines. I know it's primarily focused on those community halls. But the example that I utilized in Elmville is just one example across the municipality. I can't speak for other community halls, but I've heard from around this table and I've heard from conversations throughout the municipality that we have these great community spaces, but as we continue to raise the cost of them, they become more inaccessible to our residents to access. I look at a space like the Grenfell Hall, which I haven't had the pleasure of visiting yet, understanding that we have just made a significant investment, and raising the fee there potentially limits that access for residents in that ward as well. So anyway, that's just my concerns at a high level right now.
Deputy Cabral and then Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Once again, I'll point out that the fees have not increased in 2 years. We froze them. Yet the costs for heating and all of the other things do increase. And I'd hazard to say that the facilities were available at this lower rate for 2 years. And anybody who wanted to utilize them would certainly be able to. This is what's going to happen if we put it off for another year. Then maybe they're going to come back and say we need to increase the price by 15%. To try and spin it all away back around how the residents are going to somehow be disadvantaged by it. Yeah, there could be a Zumba class there, but most of the events that I've gone to there have been organized events or weddings or parties where they needed a hall facility. We also have the hall facility at the arena. Township cannot really afford to simply just keep holding the price. So I don't have a difficulty with that. Private halls are still far more expensive than our own local community halls. I'd like to see them utilized more, but I don't see it as a substantial increase. I see it as a reasonable increase, and I think it's one way for the users to utilize a beautiful facility at what I would consider to be a fairly reasonable price myself. Thank you.
Councillor Alexander and then Councillor Fisher.
So just a couple comments here. I'm going to take a bit of a different spin on what Councillor Garwood has been talking about, because end goal, I think we see the same. I think we're coming at it from two different angles, which is fine. I feel like we should be looking at what does the market dictate. We have these community halls. The point of them is for our residents to use them. They shouldn't be free, absolutely not. But if they're not being rented out, I'd be interested to see how often are they being rented out. Are they being rented out 30% of the time? Because if they're only being rented out 30% of the time, I think we are charging too much. The point of having them, and yes, I do understand it costs us more with heat and cleaning and stuff to when we rent them out, but why do we have them? Why do we throw them on our website and talk about how great they are and what a great community spring water is if nobody's using them because we're charging too much? So again, I'm not saying we're charging, I don't want to see a rate increase or we freeze it, but I would be interested in knowing the actual rental rate of these facilities, because I think that would give us some information that we could make decisions around.
Thank you. And before I do go to Councillor Fisher, I'll just turn to Director Culver to highlight the 200, how many different municipalities did we compare ourselves against? If you could highlight that for us, please.
Through your worship, you're referring to the BMA study. So yeah, that's a study that determines where our costs are relative to an average of a large sample across the province, which actually can be subdivided down into city and county and region as well. Yeah, we are lower than the average expense on those relative to parks, recreation, and facilities. Sorry.
My apologies. We are lower than, or our subsidy is lower than?
Sorry, our expenses to relative to those costs are lower. Yeah. So we're paying less to subsidize or invest in. We're paying less of an investment in those services than the average of the study. The question I think from Councillor Alexander was about whether they're being used or not, and I think we could come back with a facility statistics for sure. I will say that in my time, 5-6 months I've been here, that I've had one complaint about the price that's being charged, and it was from a non-resident looking to bring their venture into one of our community halls. So we haven't really had complaints, and I'm looking at Manager Dean to confirm that. So it's not been a cost issue at this point.
Thank you for that. And I think too, it's difficult because when we want to look at the usage, whether it's 30% or how often it's being used, we don't know how many people are not selecting our halls and going elsewhere because of the cost. And it's much like when we turn to our ice rates or our primetime ice rates, and it's, yes, we're at 99% capacity, but then we don't go to Coldwater and Wasaga Beach and see how much of their ice time is being utilized by EMHA. So I think it's a very difficult parameter to set. I think that as a council, we need to choose our level of investment. We need to choose our level of subsidy. And it really just comes down to a matter of what are we willing to put on the regular tax rate, and what are we willing to put back to the end user? I would agree that our rates are already significantly higher than some of our close or near neighbors, and all the reports that we get is that the investment across Ontario is much different than that of Springwater Township. I get that we have put a freeze on it, but I also think that we started from a very high level, a very high expense. So putting a freeze on it might not mean that we need to now move to increasing the user fees. Maybe we just need to, as a council, increase the level of investment or subsidy that we're providing to offset that. Councillor Fisher?
I do agree in reinvestment in the facilities. As it pertains to the halls themselves, I think we're actually very reasonable. As a matter of fact, I've had a few residents who've rented the Midhurst Hall say it's quite reasonable. So I certainly haven't experienced any pushback there. Going back to the freeze for a number of years, I think when we take a look at inflation and the cost of repairs, I think an increase of that small amount is justifiable. I also have to say too that I approach it a little bit differently, although I am in some level of agreement with Councillor Garwood. We do want our residents to be using these facilities, but I think we definitely need to reinvest in these facilities. I can speak for the Midhurst Hall. The driveway is falling apart, needs paint. So we want them to actually be desirable and live up to the rental price that we're asking as well, right? We want them to be desirable. If we are to ask a premium, I'll say it, we do want the facilities to be up to snuff, if you will, right? We can't just charge an amount and expect people just to want it because it's cheaper or we charge more, but we don't reinvest in those facilities. So I think, every facility in every ward needs to be well cared for and reinvested in if we're to ask this premium.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And just to add on to some of the council members' comments there, yes, I think we all have a hall in each of our wards that we would love to have a little bit of love given to, right? I know the Grenfell Hall is from the photos I've seen looks incredible, and I wish we could copy that across 5 different wards. But again, going back to even what Councillor Fisher noted, I believe it was around inflation and cost of repairs and all of that. And then even back to what the Deputy Mayor had noted earlier on around the municipality can't afford to continue to do this, et cetera. But we can if the residents want to pay for it. And that's really where I'm trying to focus here is I'm not saying that they do. I'm not saying that they don't. What I'm saying is the folks that I have had the pleasure of speaking with, Elmvale is a very recreation-focused community. We have the only arena in this municipality, in this community. 3 of the 4 most expensive facilities to book in this municipality is in Elmvale. So when I think about that, understanding the community loves our local spaces, my community has asked me to advocate for things to not become more expensive in regards to our municipal facilities, understanding that yes, there are significant investments. We invest in the arena every single year. Do we see it in pretty paint colors and new driveways? We definitely do not see that. It's behind the scenes to keep the operation going, and that's amazing because our arena is important in the lifeblood of our community. But at the end of the day, we know, and at least I know what I'm hearing is folks want access closer to home, and they don't want the cost of recreation to continue to rise when everything else is in their life. And we know that, right? We sit here every single year, we talk about budget, and we're going to talk about this. This council has the option and the ability to say to the community, if you want recreation to be a focus, we can make it a focus. It's going to cost more. It's going to cost more on your taxes. You're going to pay more. But again, the folks that I've spoken, and especially our Elmvale Community Recreation Association, has taken the time to listen to the community, to gauge the sense of the community around recreation and where we see ourselves moving forward. And what we're hearing is folks saying, I'm willing to pay 30, 40, 50 more dollars on my taxes each year. I'm willing to pay another % on my taxes each year to be able to have access. Understanding not everybody accesses recreation. We know that. But not everyone accesses all of the services that we have as well. Understanding many of those are cost recovery focused, but recreation I see is very different than a building permit. It is not the same thing. So that is why I struggle to sit here tonight and support an increase to our halls, even if we're just talking halls right now. That's what the report is focused, understanding there's been other conversation here around bringing in fees, maybe that we're spending elsewhere, which I agree with, and I would love to see more come back on. I do wonder if maybe we are not in a position right now to make a decision on this tonight. I know there's been a few asks at this table, at least informally. And I believe Director Culver has mentioned he would like the opportunity to be able to take some of that away and report back to council. Not saying that that's going to directly affect the end result of our fees here. I just don't want to see us make a potential error and approving something right now without all the information. Now, I know someone's going to argue and say that we've paused for 2 years and we should be raising the fees and they're already getting a better deal because we haven't raised the fees in 2 years. What is a better deal? Is it our focus to invest in recreation, or is it not? Or is it not?
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I personally see an immense benefit in being involved in recreation. It's been 50 years since I played hockey, so I don't use the facility any longer, but I still see the benefits in my life, in my friendships and my alumni associations from that experience 50 years ago. And I am concerned about the cost it is for, I think, for some of our youth, boys and girls, the cost is getting prohibitive where they can't participate. So I'm all for freezing the fees. Also, the Anton Mills Community Center that's used a lot, I think is about half the cost of the Elmville Community Center to rent. And so I'm not concerned about the little increase that Anton Mills is getting, but I'd be happy to freeze the fees in Elmville because they are much more expensive than the other community centers. So that may be a solution too that might solve your problem, Councillor Garwood. But I see even for those that don't use the recreation facilities today as a community, I think there's an immense benefit for us to continue to invest in this.
Thank you. And I think I've said it before, if even if you're not on the ice skating, there's generally an entourage with every player, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever's coming out. It's more of a benefit. It's a community hub. It brings people together. And I think recreation's, it's difficult to apply one lens to all of it. We invest in our trails. We invest in our parks. We invest in our open spaces. We invest in recreation as a whole, and we often do so when the need becomes available, whether it's reinvestment in our halls or additions or roofs or whatever it is. And I've used the analogy before, we have many communities within Springwater, and I like to apply the analogy of the children. And just because one child needs braces doesn't mean you're going to put braces on all of them just to make it fair. Every community has unique needs, but I think that as a whole in Springwater, placing that investment or choosing a level of investment, that might be a bigger conversation for us to have, whether, and I do understand that the halls have different rates, but they also have different amenities. So I don't think it's feasible for us to say that one hall, like we're gonna have a flat rate for each of the halls, because some you can have different events in. So this is I want to say it's a bigger picture than, we've tried to chunk it out to make it more, to get where we need to go as a council. But to apply that lens of, as a council, we're investing in recreation and how can we best do that? I think might not be as simple as raising fees here and freezing fees there. So I will turn to Director Culver.
Thank you, Worship. I did notice that Councillor Fisher had his hand up before me, so in case you wanted to get ahead.
Councillor Fisher?
I'll make it brief. I just to basically agree with what you're saying, Mayor Coughlin. Being a parent with daughters who play hockey, it really is a bit of a community hub, if you will, right? Even the much smaller rink we do have in Midhurst becomes just that. So I absolutely do agree. I just have to balance it out, and I'm having a real trouble with it. I'll be honest. I have to balance it out with being fiscally responsible, because every year nobody's going to like to pay in that year, right? So we will get this every time we take a look at this, we will see this. And I don't think anyone's saying, oh, don't worry, 1% extra on my taxes. If they're saying that, they're not very good at math, right? So, so anyway, I really struggle with it because I do agree with you. We need to invest in recreation, but we also need to be really smart about it. So anyway, just how I feel, middle of the road.
No, and either they're really bad at math or they choose to invest in recreation. So I think that it's to, again, we've heard from people on both sides, and we had a very lively discussion 18 months ago, and we're here again. And I don't think the conversation has become any easier. So Director Culver.
Thank you, Worship. I'm thinking it might be helpful if I, first of all, I'll reiterate my apology for the typo. I confirmed with Manager Dean it's a typo. We didn't intend to put the 25%. It was effectively holding that 40% subsidy. But I think it's worth explaining, which I probably didn't do adequately enough in the report. So again, apologies for that. Subsidy is a really difficult concept, and it's based on the idea that we know we are all using the same model for assessing the costs. So the consultant used indirect and direct costs to assess the model they used to determine a subsidy rate. I did not, because indirect costs are things like pieces of salaries that may have a contact with the building. It's a holistic approach. It's huge. It's much bigger than something that I can accomplish in a staff report. So I used very generic, right out of the budget, right out of the actuals, math that just says, here's what we got in revenues and here's what we got in ice fees. So that 40% subsidy, and just for explanation, means that in the case of minor hockey, for example, they're paying 60% of what it costs to operate that building right out of the budget. With the benefit of three previous municipalities, in my experience, in every case, it's been at least the flop. It's been the opposite. So the municipality has contributed 60% of the costs, and the users pay 40%, using the same kind of modeling. So it's a really difficult idea, and I understand the struggle that council is having with it, because you're trying to create a philosophical barrier. You're trying to say, here's where we value recreation, and I know that's a bit of an emotional context, but you're saying here's the line that we want to draw that says here's what the investment in recreation is worth to us, and it's really, really difficult, and I appreciate that, but I want to be clear on what a subsidy actually is. It's in our case 40% of what that facility cost to operate is being carried by the municipality, which is not common relative to a lot of different models. The other option you have is to look at the market rate, which is what we did in this report, where we said, you know, what is everybody paying, and how are we going to fit into that matrix of payments? And so all the municipalities, all my colleagues in my 50 contacts across the province, we all try to shoot for the middle, because truthfully, it's the most palatable to the user, and it represents some value in terms of subsidy rate. But again, it's a line that council needs to draw. So I think it might be an easier conversation to break it down into two ideas: market rate, subsidy rate. Which is the idea we want to follow, and what line do we want to draw on either one? Do we want to be in the middle of the market, or do we want to be at a rate that we can determine collectively? Breaking it down into those simple ideas may help the conversation, and may help you with your decision. So I hope that was helpful. I just wanted to put it out there.
So what I'm hearing is you would like to write that report for us. I'll go to Councillor Alexander, and I did have Councillor Garwood, but Councillor Alexander sounds like it's a comment on that.
Yes, so I would personally really appreciate more work from you, sorry. But I do think, because I think we can get too blinders on, like I know 18 months ago, it was all Elmo minor hockey because they were very loud, they were here, they had stuff to say. So we listened, and now we're more just talking about the halls, which I understand, but I do really like the idea of having, you know, kind of the full, whether it's market, subsidy, be able to look at both of it and decide, what do we want that rate to be? Pretty much across. So we're not talking about halls, we're not talking about minor hockey, we're not talking about skating. We really should have a focus. And so I personally would love to see that.
Dr. Culver and then Councillor Garwood.
Yeah, so through your worship, so that is the policy that we're committing to in the report. That the last recommendation in the report is the policy where we would come back to you. We haven't had the capacity to come to you yet with that, but that is the intention, is to come before you with a policy that says, here's a subsidy target based on research that might support that subsidy target, or here's a market target based on a philosophy that supports the market target. We're still going to need council to make a decision and provide direction, but I understand that it's a complicated concept, and if we're able to break it down into two simple streams, maybe there's a better chance of getting some clarity in the decision.
Councillor Garwood and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And to add on to what Councillor Alexander had mentioned, yes, I would agree with that approach. I think that is information that we should have, and I can see there also being a benefit to whether this is included or not. And maybe this already exists, and my apologies if it does. But providing a snapshot into the future as to what fees will look like or could look like, understanding council has the ability and the will to adjust them as they see fit. But I know that would also support and assist those user groups in being able to properly budget and prepare, so there isn't a shock and awe and in the middle of a season or right before the season, and these user groups cannot continue. But then again, and I'll try to make it my last comment on the halls piece specifically is, I look at the increase, and that's fine, understanding that things get more expensive. But then the question that we get from residents is, well, what do I get for that increase? And we know there isn't. Unless we are making a significant investment like we have in some of our community halls, understanding there is only so much to go around, we're not doing that in every hall. So when we make that increase across the board, our residents say, well, I'm paying $45 more a day to use this space, and I'm still using the same space that I did last year or the year before or 5 years ago, and nothing has changed. So again, those are the concerns that I'm hearing. I'm here to advocate for them and to put those out there. I would like to see some additional information come back. I think there's been a fulsome conversation around this table tonight. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, to be honest with you, in regards to where we go from here, but I would struggle to support it as it is.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I noticed with the halls, particularly in the report, that you've done a lot of work around consistency with the hourly rental rates and the weekday rental rate. And I think that's really important, that the consistency across all the halls is recognized and that one is not more or less important than the other, aside from Elmvale, unfortunately, because it seems to be a little bit more expensive than the halls, but you do have a lot more to offer as well. So the other halls are a lot more simple. We're going to talk about the service groups next. So I think I'll hold my comments for that discussion. But I just wanted to say that I did notice that, and I think that's important for our residents.
Thank you. So council, I'm going to ask that our Deputy Clerk Marshall does read the existing resolution as it is before us. After she is finished, at any point, members of council can offer amendments. We can simply refer with specific direction. So Deputy Clerk Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So the motion on the floor currently is that the report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Facilities regarding fees and charges, Recreation Parks and Facilities user fees dated October 16th, 2024 be received, and that council approve fees and charges, Recreation Parks and Facilities as provided for in Appendix A, and that Schedule F of Bylaw 2024-046 be repealed and replaced with Appendix A, and that staff develop a Parks and Recreation user fee guideline or policy with input from user groups, residents, and stakeholders.
Thank you. So this time I will turn to members of council for any amendments. Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And maybe just a bit of clarity. So the user fee guideline policy, Director, through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Director Culver, is there a timeline or an estimated timeline in regards to when that may end up back at this table?
Director Culver?
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, the idea was to have it back in time for the next budget cycle. Having said that, I've heard from council that there's an interest in seeing it sooner, and it sounds like there might be discussion through it. So we'll do our best, but I hopefully middle of next year, we'd be able to return something that council can have a look at.
Follow on?
Thank you, Director Culver. I'm just thinking this through. I would like to see this referred back to staff at this moment in time for additional information. I'd like to see it potentially align with that guideline, understanding that is, in my own words that I've used before, kicking it down the road. But I would like more information at this table, in my opinion, before we make a decision.
Deputy Cabral and Councillor Alexander.
Hey, Mayor Coughlin, thank you. If this is going to make life a little bit easier, because there are some new fees in there too, If this is about the recreational halls, I'm prepared to suggest that the recreational hall fees be frozen until that policy guideline comes forth with new recommendations on those fees, and then pass the rest of this as is. And just a comment on utilizing the same space. I'm pretty sure I'm putting the same gallon of gasoline in my car every week, but the price does keep going up. So, I mean, if that's amenable to council, that would be an amendment I'd be prepared to put forth, and I think that might help Councillor Garwood move forward with this. Thank you.
Councillor Alexander?
Yeah, I think that's a great compromise. The amount of money we're going to gain over the next 8 months until we get this report, I'd prefer not to make a decision that we don't have all the information on. I don't think we're coming out that far ahead. So, thank you, Deputy Cabral. I'm happy to move forward with that amendment.
Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. Echoing that, yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm fine to second that as that amendment as well. So just for clarity, we would only be approving the new fees in red that are listed within Appendix A. That's how I have it. So if somebody could please clarify that, that'd be great.
Director Culver, is there a preference from staff whether you would like us to split the fees and approve some and freeze some, or is there anything? I just see both of you doing a little bit of this, so I'm just curious if you could elaborate for us how we can work together to make sure this is amenable to staff and also to council. Manager Dean.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through yourself to the rest of council. So just to expand a bit on the new fees. So the new fees are in the fields in the ball diamond section. They're really clarifying some fees that are currently in place that were a multi-hour fee or caused a bit of confusion when groups are booking multiple facilities, not just township facilities. So it's really a clarification. The rate is essentially the same rate. It's just divided out to be much more user-friendly when you're reading it. And then the new fees in the facilities are to do with a change in security deposits we take. So specifically for license events where sometimes we do see more damage to a hall, then we do have that security deposit in place to ensure that we can fix any damage required. And again, there was just a little bit of clarification in the facilities around kind of the decorating or the day before fee, as well as the youth and adult pavilion fee that were previously brought to council and discussed previously through delegations. So from my standpoint, and I believe Director Culver is in agreement, we would be happy to see those go through, and we are in council's hands and up to your decisions on how you would like to go forward with the other fees.
Thank you for that. Sounds like that's a good plan. So I have it. The motion before council be amended as follows, that the facility rental fees be frozen at 2024 fees until the policy is approved. Does that make? Director Culver?
Sorry, with CEO Schmidt was mentioning to me, but if we can make sure that we, with the exception of the new fees, so that we capture the new fees.
The amendment would now read that the facility rental fees be frozen at the 2024 fees until the policy is approved with the exception of the new fees. Does that satisfy the intent? And we had a mover and seconder for that, or no, I did not. No. A mover and seconder for the amendment, please. I have Deputy Cabral and Councillor Alexander. So council, we are now just voting on the amendment to freeze until the policy does come back forward. All those in favor? And the amendment has carried, and we will move back to the main motion as amended. And I had that moved by Councillor Moore and seconded by Councillor Thompson, and you're both fine as amended. If there's anything further on this, council? Not seeing anything. Main motion as amended. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now continue to discuss fees and charges. We'll move on to 8.6. Mover and seconder have the waiving of the fees and charges for the rental space for service clubs on the floor. We have Councillor Moore and Councillor Fisher. That the report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Facilities regarding waiving fees and charges for rental space by service clubs dated October 16th, 2024 be received, and that council direct staff not to charge service clubs for meetings booked in Springwater Community Halls subject to the service club objectives, producing funds that support Springwater community. And this is now on the floor, and I will open it up for discussion. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I did have some comments with this. I think we need to take the focus away from funds. Part of the reasoning for that is funds are great if they're brought back into our community, but there's a number of service clubs that do great work for the community. They're a fabric of the community. Example being, say, Scouts Canada, Girl Guides. There are other ones out there too. So that would be one area that I would like to see not focused on, but certainly the service club aspect is important. I would suggest that if a policy is brought forth, that it does contain not only guidelines, but also constraints to ensure that service clubs, let's face it, don't take advantage of it. And that it might be best to put service clubs that have actually qualified in order to hold their meetings. There should be some criteria in place. Include them on an appendix rather than that way the appendix can change as necessary. And outside of that, I think it's a pretty good idea. It's just we have to be mindful that, to suggest that, there might only be a handful of service clubs that might be looking to do this. I think we'd be naive. There's service clubs out there that operate in our community that many of us are not familiar with. And they do great work. We just don't know about them. The Civitan Club, the Kinsmen, there's lots of groups out there. I don't know if we have a girls and boys club in Springwater, but they have one in Midland, and that doesn't mean that we can't have one in the future. So that would be my concerns. I hope that might be something that could be addressed by staff going forward, to make sure that the service clubs actually do want to utilize the space, in particular for meetings, not for every event that they want to hold.
Director Culver.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and thanks to the Deputy Mayor and other councillors have also indicated that concern. So we've already begun crafting a definition of what a service club is, and I've shared that with the clerk. And I think by the time we bring the bylaw back, should council approve the bylaw, because there will be a bylaw because we've got the new fees to cover. We'll make sure that there's a definition attached that creates a limited understanding of what the policy is for, so that, again, it's not, we don't want to create confusion. It's really designed for service clubs that provide a benefit to the Springwater community based on their affiliation with a larger body, based on, I've got it crafted on the back here, but I'll save it for when we bring it back to council, but we are working on that, and thanks for that comment.
Councillor Fisher.
So I'll make it brief. No, I'm glad to hear you say that, Mr. Culver. I know that the Lions Club, I believe, were sort of the catalyst for this, and they do tremendous work, in all of our communities. Three of them throughout Springwater. I know in my neck of the woods they do tremendous work. They're very involved, and I think that level of support from us is paramount. I know it's important to them. I believe you were at their meeting recently and they expressed that to you. So I thank you for going to that meeting. So, I am in support of it, but I do like the way this is shaping up. I don't want it to be too vague. So, anybody can fit their way into being a service club. So I think it does have to be very specific. An example of the Lions Club is perfect. So.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And yes, I'll echo others. I agree. I do support this matter. And I'm glad the Deputy Mayor brought it forward in regards to an appendix. I see this similar to how we have the digital sign approved users set up in that sense. We have a list and that can be amended as we see fit. So I'm happy to see this come forward.
Not seeing anything further, council. We do have this moved in second. Council, all those in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to item 8.8, we do have declaration from Councillor Alexander. May I have a mover and seconder for the student wage grid, please? I have Councillor Moore and Councillor Garwood that the report from the manager, people and talent, payroll and benefits dated October 16th, 2024 regarding student wage grid be received, and that the necessary funds for implementation of the student wage grid effective January 1st, 2025 be included as part of the 2025 budget deliberations, and that a bylaw approving the student wage grid be presented for final consideration at the October 16th, 2024 regular meeting of council. And at this time, council, we can open it up to the floor for discussion. Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. We have to pull them to be separate for declarations, so. And moving on now to item 8.13, may I have a mover and seconder for the community hub, please? I have Councillor Garwood and Deputy Cabral that the report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Facilities regarding the award of GPO 2024-42 RPF Community Hub Archaeological and Engineering Services report dated October 16th be received, and that GPO 2024-42 RPF be awarded to Collier's project leaders in the amount of 193,530.08 for services related to stage 2 community hub development processes, and further a 10% contingency be allocated to support unforeseen expenses related to the project, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the resulting agreement. Did I call for a mover and seconder? Yes, I did. All right, we're open up. We've got it on the floor. Open up to Councillor Fisher.
Through you to, I believe, Manager Dean Culver. Approximately how much have we spent thus far on consultants? So far on the hub project, you know?
I'll ask the CAO to help me with that question, please.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Colgan. Through you to Councillor Fisher. I believe Councillor Fisher, the Weston contract was around approximately the same, about 190,000, give or take.
Following?
So just to clarify, so we're sitting at probably just under $400,000 invested thus far in the project.
CEO Schmidt.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Fisher, that would assume council approving this tonight, it would be equate to 400.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm gonna kind of take us back to a motion from April the 17th regarding the community hub and how our municipality would go about the financing aspect of the community hub, and had sought some scenarios, some projections from staff. I will admit that it wasn't what I anticipated it would be. It came as part of another staff report that was brought forward at the July the 3rd regular meeting of council regarding stage gating of the community hub. The number then was $76 million, according to that particular report. And there was little there to provide significant funding models or address the motion from April the 17th. And I've been given this quite a bit of thought the last little while. And I guess the where and the how of how that money would come to basically satisfy and allow the municipality to undertake the construction of the community hub. However, it did advise in that report that the municipality could take on debt up to the tune of $90 million at 5% amortization over 30 years. And that's a significant number. A lot of the financing was going to come from DC's development charges. And what I find right now is, in my mind, and I see on here that there's a grant application. I'm hopeful that that might provide some funding to go towards the community hub. I don't know if that's where it's intended to go specifically, but that's where I would hope some of it might go. No, something else. I was hoping that a chunk of that might. And the reason I say that is because I see two conflicting priorities right now. One is the community hub. The other one is Craig Road. And Craig Road is needed, in my mind, basically because they're both seeking opportunities. And I think we're looking at hopefully gaining some government funding, I thought, through grant applications for both of these. And then we also have the overshadowing Barrie boundary adjustment annexation in the Springwater still going on in the background. So the struggle I'm having is while I see a priority for Craig Road, it's needed, more houses and traffic is coming. Houses bring with them development charges to help build Craig Road. In essence, Craig Road will contribute to the financial well-being of Springwater through DCs and taxation. The community hub as an entity unto itself does not do that. So the problem I'm having is trying to move forward with two significant projects that are in the tens of $millions each. And so for me, I'm having a hard time trying to justify supporting this tonight until I know a little bit more about where we're at on Craig Road. Because if I have to make a choice between the two of them, an infrastructure piece would have to take priority. And that infrastructure piece is going to hopefully allow the development to get completed and get some houses built up there. It's going to alleviate the traffic in Midhurst. And quite frankly, it's going to bring the developmental charges and the taxation that would actually be supportive of building the community hub. I don't know where the dollars are going to come from, but even when I look at the $90 million as far as being able to amortize that over 30 years, I still struggle on, what could be $120 or $130 million investment when you look at Craig Road's potential costs, in addition to the 76 million that was put in the report back in July 3rd with respect to the stage gating report from staff. So that's my dilemma, and I would really like maybe from staff, either from I guess CEO Schmidt through Mayor Coughlin to you, how we're going to be able to manage that, because I did present this question on April the 17th, and to be quite honest, I really don't think we've been provided with an idea scope or scenarios or mechanisms that would allow me to really see into the crystal ball and understand how this is all going to be paid for.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. So Deputy Mayor Cabral, you're right, Craig Road is 100% development charge funded. That said, we don't have those development charges today. And so we will have to do some interim financing to make sure that we can proceed with that. So that project, as noted at the last meeting, we had requested that council support an application for funding, and hence council has provided that opportunity. And so we will be seeking some funding from the provincial government to assist with that project, obviously. And I think from a timing perspective, that project, I would say, is a priority. It needs to get going as quickly as possible, and that's what staff's direction is at this point. As it relates to this project, I think it's a timing matter, in the sense of what we're asking for is this next stage of this project to proceed, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Culver, I think if council agrees with this direction tonight, or this request tonight, we're probably looking at the end of this term of council, where this portion would be completed and would provide for an opportunity to enhance, if you will, or revise the numbers that have been provided, that Weston had originally provided, to get a little more granular, if you will, as it relates to both operating and capital costs. And I think Director Culver mentioned back in July, when he presented the stage gating processes, is at the end of this stage, council has the opportunity to say yay or nay. So you're not tonight, we're not asking you to put $76 million forward, if you will. It's kind of the next stage of this process to determine, what is this community hub potentially going to look like, and what is the community requesting? What is the cost going to be? A much more detailed analysis than what were provided through the Weston Consulting. And I would also say that this project, and I again stand to be corrected from our Director of Finance, I believe in the changes that we are suggesting through our development charge bylaw, we've made some changes to not only the fire station to ensure that we update those costs and collect on those updated costs, we've also made changes to this community hub, or will be looking to make changes to this community hub to also collect development charges at the level that are appropriate for this. So as you mentioned, as those development charges are being collected for Craig Road through those new houses, we'll also be collecting development charges from recreation piece towards our community hub. How that's all going to look, I think what we had suggested is that in 2025, we're due to update our long-range financial plan, which will give council a much better picture of not only those two projects, but all the different initiatives that are on the plate for the township, and try to give you a better understanding, if you will, as to what the bigger picture looks like from a financial sustainability piece. So I get what you're saying tonight, but I would say that really this next process is just kind of next stage to give you more information about this community hub project. It's not committing you to build at this stage. It's really, we need to move to this next stage, provide for better estimates, provide for a better understanding of what the amenities within the community hub would look like, and then council can make their decision at the end of that process as to, do you wish to continue or not? So there is another opportunity for council to say, we need to pump the brakes on this.
Follow on?
Thank you, Mayor, CEO Schmidt. But once again, I just reiterate, part of my dilemma is the fact that what I originally asked for really didn't materialize to give me a good comfort level going forward. When I added Craig Road to the mix, I really struggled with $130 million. And having said that, I know that, delaying costs go up. But once again, it's like, do we delay the hub going forward and the costs go up, or do we delay Craig Road going forward and the costs go up because the Craig Road's doubled or more by now from what we originally talked about? So I do appreciate your answer, and I'll certainly digest it a bit and let other council members speak.
Thank you for that. I do have Director Culver and Councillor Alexander, and just speaking to potential delay of Craig Road. Can we speak to the conditions within the Midhurst secondary plan? Is there a portion whereby Craig Road needs to be constructed before certain phases can be developed? CEO Schmidt.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, I'll do my best, and I may need Manager Harvey here to help me. So yes, you're right. Basically, Craig Road is a condition of development for basically neighborhood 2. So it's supposed to be developed in tandem with phase 2, or neighborhood 2, sorry. So again, we're trying our best to move that project forward as best as possible. There was an update at the last meeting. I was remiss here to mention that we've also had some recent discussions with our partners at the county to try to assist with the opportunity to fund this project. As we all know, I think it's public knowledge that this road will eventually be a county road. And so, we've had some preliminary discussions with them to see, is there an opportunity for them to assist us maybe with phase 2 of the project, or even part of phase 1. They are helping us with the acquisition of properties. They're not obviously paying for that portion right now, but as we get into the project, we could hopefully bring back something for council's consideration where the county may be able to assist with some of this funding for this project, knowing full well that it's going to be a county road in the future.
Thank you. Director Culver and Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I thought it would be a good idea just to sort of add to what CEO Smith had already mentioned by saying this project actually will do some of the work to help us understand more clearly what the financial demand is going to be. It has a fundraising feasibility and viability component to the project where we'll be looking at opportunities to offset tax-based funding. There is a business case that is part of your decision-making at the end of this phase where you'll look at it and say, are we ready to take on this kind of a project? Strategically, I don't personally don't see that it one or the other, because this is not the same as Craig Road. Craig Road is an infrastructure piece, totally understand. I don't think anything should get in the way of that. This is setting us up so that things don't get more expensive by virtue of having to do this part of the process, which is essential to the project down the road. Not only is the building going to get more expensive, but this work is going to get more expensive. So with having said all that, by the time we're done this stage, you would have the opportunity to have a Class D level of costing based on clearly defined objectives for the facility, which you can work with in terms of saying, yes, no, we want to do this, we want to do it to this level, these are the parts we want, these are the parts we don't want, all relative to your need for a funding pathway. So I just want to be clear on that that's really what you're asking for, is actually kind of baked into this process. Because I do understand you definitely want to know everything you need to know before you make a decision this large.
Councillor Alexander?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I have some similar concerns to the deputy mayor. I actually have higher numbers, so I hope your numbers are right. When I was looking at, I had Craig Road at a 60+ million. I had the hub probably sitting around 100 million, depending if we throw a rink in there or not. And then I also added the fire hall, which is another major project, obviously underway, at 10 million, which is $170 million, which is a lot of money. We keep hearing that. I do understand that, the majority of the funding is coming from DCs, but when, like, how quickly are we going to get them? Building is slowed down. Until we actually receive those DCs, we have to pay for it ourselves. So I'm struggling with, that's a really big number. I don't want us to, overextend ourselves, or, our tax rate has to go way up because, we have the regular municipality to run and staff increases and all that, plus a ridiculous amount of debt financing because we've all of a sudden embarked on a lot of projects at once that are a lot of money. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the idea of this hub and I'm excited to see it move forward. I just personally at this point am struggling with not understanding where those, again, I feel like we throw around the term DC like it's monopoly money. It's not real money, but it is real money. So I struggle with that one. And I think maybe part of my hesitation with this next consultant phase is the first consultant we got, which we paid $200,000 to, essentially gave us garbage. I'm not gonna say garbage, but I'm pretty sure everybody at this table was disappointed in the results of what we got. So now putting forward another $200,000, crossing our fingers that this one's gonna be better. So that worries me that we're gonna be $400,000 in with hopefully something to show for it, but I really don't feel like the first one gave us anything. So those are where my concerns are right now.
Okay, and before I do go to Councillor Fisher's, might be actually shooting myself in the foot in this one, but it's not 400,000. We had to purchase the property. We did borehole testing. We did a bunch of environmental testing, and then we had to do the environmental testing again. I really think that when we are, to me, this is us progressing with this. And as much as I don't like spending any money on consultants, it is part and parcel with what we do. And I think that by not supporting this, we're basically saying, kill the hub. This is the next step forward. So if we're not willing to take this step forward, then this council, we might as well just pass a resolution to say, put it off to the next council. Because really, this next step is going to essentially push it to the next council anyway. I think the results as they come back, it might be during lame duck, potentially. I see this as doing our diligence in our term for what we can do to set the next council up for the decisions they will need to be making. So I will be supporting this. I think that we need to continue with the process as much as the consultant fees are continuing to get astronomical. When you put it into proportion of what we've already invested in this hub, and like you said, as we're all excited about it, it's a necessity for our community. What that necessity essentially looks at is phases and phases away. But I think we need to stay on path with the progress for this. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I see risk both ways. I see a greater risk in not doing anything and not moving forward now. So I also can support this with regards to the development charges. We know the people are coming. Any study that I've seen, I've read, we know they're coming, whether it's this year or 5 years. I think that it's time to move forward with the plan, and I'm in support of this.
Councillor Fisher?
Yeah, I see what everyone's saying, and I do see both sides of it, as Councillor Thompson agreed. Unfortunately, I can't support it tonight. $400,000. I'm not feeling like thus far we've gotten really good value for our money, and I'm worried that another $400,000 is just it's throwing money at another consultant, and I'm really worried that we won't get exactly what we want. Turning it back to Craig Road and something that Mr. Culver said on when we delay things, they do cost money, and he's 100% right. Unfortunately, I think we've not been diligent enough with Craig Road. You know, I can remember watching council long before I was on council, and it was about $16 million, I believe, at one point, if I recall. Prior to me being on council, I remember speaking to some people, and it was in the 40 million range, still attainable. And now it's in the 60s. And by the time we end up doing it, who knows what it'll be. It's mandatory that we have it. And so I see this project as taking precedent. I'd like to see, frankly, us delay what we're doing here tonight. I've also had a lot of people call me about this tonight, more than I frankly expected. Two things they raised with me. These are residents in Ward 5 and surrounding area. One was Craig Road. Is it in jeopardy? All right. I tend to think it is when we start hitting our borrowing ceiling. Also, the talks that we're having with the city of Barrie, that was constantly raised, you know, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anyone at this table at this juncture really does either. But you know, one person phoned me and said, "Are we spending $100 million plus?" And we may not be able to support it, or it may not be ours. I couldn't give him an answer, but I don't think anyone at this council can right now. So that's another reason to maybe delay this. Also, I will say economically, if we take a look at things, development's actually slowing. Councillor Thompson's right, people are coming, but the DCs, counting the DCs is a bonus that's right around the corner. I think it's counting our chickens before they've hatched. So I think to delay this another 6 months, there's no problem with that. So that's my feeling about it. So I will not support it tonight, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And I guess just for clarification, so the point was that Craig Road years ago was going to be 12 million, then 40 million. As we learned in my first term, the fire hall was 2.8, then it went to 5.5. So the suggestion that delaying this another 6 months isn't going to have an impact. We just know it's going to get more expensive. We know it's work that needs to be done, and by doing it today. I also just want to clarify, after the last couple meetings, I've had some residents reach out about the jeopardy of our fire hall, our Craig Road, and our municipal building with terms for the city of Barrie. There was mapping that was provided to our residents, but it always gets tossed around at this table that we need to put a hold on things until the city of Barrie, the negotiations with the city of Barrie have been finalized. We don't have control over that process. What we do have control over is what we do and how we move forward. I also think that the mapping that was provided to the residents did not include the land we have purchased to build this hub. It did not include the land that we are currently building the hall, and it did not include the land of Craig Road. Those lands are not in, as long as the last mapping that was provided as in public, those lands were not indicated in that. These projects are not in jeopardy. I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of that, but I do think that there has been some misinterpretation by residents in when we say we need to put hold on these projects until we find out, that could lead to residents understanding that those lands are going to be annexed. So I don't think that's not at wavering in this. I also think that the two projects in of themselves, Craig Road was identified years and years ago as part of not only the long range financial plan, but the actual Midhurst landowners MLG. That plan has been put in place. We're now at the juncture, and the growth has put these two massive investments in front of us. And I don't think it's a matter of one over the other. I think that there could be diligence in how do we finance them both, because they do provide various And I think equitable services, one's recreation and one's a road. They're very, very different things. And to suggest that you can have a complete community without recreation, I would wholeheartedly disagree. So I think that we need to continue to invest in both as we move forward. I have follow-on Councillor Fisher.
I don't entirely disagree, Mayor Coughlin. My worry and many of the people's worry in the community is that we are seeing development up on Gill Road. We're seeing the sewers go in. We're seeing it take shape, but Craig Road is not, right? We are behind. And I think and I won't bring it up because there is information in closed session regarding Craig Road that I won't talk about, but there's a few missing pieces there that we need to finish up. So we're not as far ahead as I think we want to believe we are. So do I see that one sort of eclipses the other? I actually am starting to see that. So, I think that it's very flashy to have the hub and we want to move ahead with it. But I think we're neglecting mandated infrastructure with Craig Road. So until I see significant progress over there, I'm just not really supportive of moving ahead, spending another $200,000. And frankly, to go back, I think if anyone were to review what was brought before us previously, I wasn't that impressed with what our money got us. I really wasn't. And I think many people around this table would probably concur with that.
I have Deputy Cabral and Councillor Moore, but I haven't myself had anything come forward from Collier's project leaders. I can't place one consultant's work on theirs. Also, I continue to hear that we are behind the 8 ball on Craig Road. Is there an opportunity during the development update today that might give us a little bit of time to figure out where the timeline is, but during development update after our break, if we could just provide where the timeline was, what the original forecast was, so that we can have a good idea of where we are with the project. If at all possible. If not, at the next meeting would be great as well. I have Deputy Cabral and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I just through you to CEO Schmidt with respect to the grant application. That might lend some comfort level, certainly to me, if I knew when that might be decided on, when we might expect some kind of a response from the government, whether we're going to be getting anything or whether we're not. If that were the case, then, I'd be happy for a deferral rather than just say no.
CEO Schmidt.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Deputy Mayor Cabral. So Deputy Mayor Cabral, the one report that's on the agenda tonight, item 8.2, I believe it is. 8.3, sorry, 8.3. So staff's recommending that essentially improvements be made for the Elmville Arena through stream 1 of the Community Recreation Infrastructure Fund. So that stream 1 relates to more existing infrastructure, if you will. And then there's stream 2.
I'm sorry, CEO Schmidt, I think you misinterpreted my question. I'm speaking about the funding for Craig Road that came before us before. So I do apologize. I misinterpreted what the one that's on the agenda tonight was specifically for. I'm asking about the funding grant application for Craig Road, where we asked for some money there. Is there a timeline when we might expect some kind of response? Thank you.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Mayor. So, apologies. So my understanding is based on the guideline or the timeline that's being provided by the province. They're supposed to be providing decisions in early 2025 as to how those funds may be allocated. That being said, I believe there's actually a pre-screening that'll likely happen after we submit. I don't recall the exact requirements off the top of my head, but I believe there's 2 criteria that have to be met. And if those criteria aren't met through that pre-screening, essentially you're not going to get on to the next stage where they will do a full evaluation of your application. Assuming we get through that pre-screening, I believe it's in early 2025 that we would be seeking hopefully an answer from the province. That said, I would also maybe take the opportunity tonight. We have a information report on delegations. It might be something that council may want to consider putting a delegation forward to the Minister of Infrastructure to maybe seek some additional support for funding as it relates to this project or Craig Road or any other project that we're seeking funding for.
Thank you. Council, I do believe that, oh, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, truly. The first is about DCs, and I'm wondering if Director Heron could please just refresh council on the DCs, because the changes with the provincial policy and how DCs are collected with municipalities, I think it's important to refresh that. And what we can expect, because the timeline for development has been delayed considerably, and then our DCs are delayed. You can do that first, and then I'll ask my second question. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director of Planning or Director of Finance? Yeah, Director Bedard.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm just wondering if Councillor Moore could elaborate on what changes I'm looking to expand upon.
Yeah, so that's why I actually went to Director Heron. So what I'm looking for, Director Heron, is the changes with the provincial policy statement and this came earlier, maybe a year ago, with the DCs, when they're collected or when they're not collected any longer, and how we can use those. Sorry, CAO.
CAO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So through you to Councillor Moore. So Councillor Moore, through the collection of DCs, so typically up until a few years ago, I don't have the actual timeline because it was actually through our update through our DC bylaw. We were collecting, the township was collecting all DCs, so soft, so parks, fire, those types of DCs, in addition to what I would call the hard surface DCs, which are roads, bridges, that type of stuff, water, wastewater. We were always collecting upon building permit issuance. So if someone comes in, they submit their building permit, we go ahead and we review, we issue the permit, they are required to pay their DC as at the time of building permit issuance. We've actually changed that. Council actually approved that through an update to our DC, whereby all of the hard surfaces components, so roads, water, wastewater components that are applicable, would actually be payable upon registration of the subdivision. So up in advance of the building permit issuance. And then essentially all the soft service DCs, parks, fire, and all, can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but library, I guess, would all be paid still upon building permit issuance. So that hasn't been impacted by the legislation that through the PPS piece. That's actually a decision that council made through an update through our DC. In addition to that, some changes through legislation on DCs was, and tonight you'll see it before you, is that we were no longer able to collect DCs for growth for studies. Any studies essentially, and the 10% reduction, I believe, for some of the parks components were essentially eliminated. And that has now been reversed recently. And so council tonight, you've taken kind of the first step to at least bring the growth studies back into play so that we can actually collect, I believe it's over $2 million, $3 million, and all the different growth studies that we're looking to bring forward. In addition to that, I believe it also brings back that, it removes that 10% piece that was in place prior to the recent regulation. So we're walking the steps to try to ensure that we're collecting as much as we can in development charges from the developers to the extent we can. I think the other piece that Director Bedard can maybe speak to is tonight you have the report whereby it's the first step whereby in December, assuming that there are no appeals, essentially the collection of, or the, maybe I'll hand it over to Director Bedard. He can speak to that piece.
Director Bedard.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So, building on what CAO Schmidt said, we are taking steps to amend our development charges bylaw to collect, the development charges to the greatest extent that we can. As you mentioned, a report tonight was to include studies. Approximately $2 million now be recovered through DCs to help fund those growth-related studies. On November 6th, there'll be a public meeting, statutory meeting to update our development charges bylaw to recover the new cost of the fire hall, as well as to reduce the developer freeze period on those site plan applications from 24 months to 18 months. So reducing that freeze period in which they have to pay the rates, the rates applicable.
Thank you. And maybe further to Councillor Moore, in our last term, when Bill 23 came in, we had learned that we were going to lose out on approximately $8.3 million in DCs with 3 specific projects across the municipality. So it might be advantageous for council. Maybe we should set up a upcoming workshop for council on all the changes, because there has been many changes in the DCs in the last 5 years. So that might be beneficial to all of us to get caught up on that. So council at this time, follow on, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's appropriate because it is hard to keep up with all the changes. And we tend to say, you know, DCs will pay for it, the DCs will pay for it. And I just can't pay for everything. And I do see a risk on both sides. So I do want to just throw that out there. I definitely do. And I try to compare ourselves a bit to the school board and how the school board, when they go to build a new school, very expensive process for them. And their approach is always, we build the school when there's bums to put in the seats. You know, they don't build a school before they can basically pay for it, or they know it's going to be full. And with the community hub, we are approaching paying and building something for the future. And while I appreciate that, I do see risk. So still haven't fully decided where I'm going to land, but just so you know, that's where I'm at right now.
I have Councillor Alexander and Deputy Cabral.
So again, I'm still struggling with the DCPs, and I don't know how big of an ask this is, but is it possible to simply kind of have, and I'm not asking for right now because again, I'm giving you no warning, but how many DCs have we collected to date? Where are we sitting right now? 2, how many do we anticipate to collect in the next 2 to 5 years? And then 3, how many do we anticipate in the next 5 to 10 years? Because that actually gives us real dollar amounts to make these types of decisions. Because when I don't have real dollars and I'm just looking at big numbers and knowing that we're going to have to debt finance that, that's where my concern lies. And I don't not want to move forward with this. I want to move forward with this hub. So I don't see it if we defer this for a couple months to get the info. I would like all the relevant information before we just move to the next step, because I feel like we need that information. So I don't know how difficult those 3 questions are to answer. Not right now, but in general.
So that was like a hypothetical question? No, you actually want an answer. CEO Schmidt, I'll let you, oh, he's passing Director Bedard.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. The projection piece, that will take some time in consultation with Director Herron and his team to look at what we're forecasting in terms of growth. So in terms of an answer tonight, it'd be difficult to do that. The other piece I'll comment on is the concern shared amongst the council table with respect to financing. And, you know, that's a concern that I share myself as your Director of Finance. I think that'd be a concern that any Director of Finance would share. You know, how are we going to pay for these, especially when they're from development charges and we haven't collected those development charges? You know, that is a worry of mine. I think where we're at in the process right now is we're looking to move forward with Colliers GPO to help us gain more information to provide those projections to you. You know, we need the up-to-date costing information on the project so that we can throw that into our projections for DCs and when we're going to collect those, to look at when we're going to collect, when we're going to cash flow, what that interim financing looks like. Right now, we don't have the information needed with respect to this project to share with you. What this project will do in consultation with some of the development charges work that you're requesting, Councillor Alexander, is will give us that opportunity to provide that information to council to provide you with a bit more comfort moving forward with this project.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And I have to kind of think about Council Alexander's comments with respect to DCs. I think had we had the information that I was kind of looking for with the scenarios and that would address some of those concerns, I would have been a lot more comfortable moving forward. My dilemma right now is if this is defeated, it gives me the sense that the hub is defeated. And I don't want to have that sense. However, I think that if we could gather that information on the DCs, if we could find out where we sit with the grant for Craig Road, I mean, if the feds or the provincial government are going to give us X number of dollars or a few $1 million, or if we have some idea that the county's going to be kicking into, that alleviates the concern about Craig Road that allows me then to feel more comfortable about the hub. That's where I sit. I'd much rather, support it. And I can't say that I don't support it. The problem is trying to support it today. If it doesn't go through, I get the sense that it almost kills the whole project. I don't want to see that happen. I'd much rather see some kind of a deferral to see where we sit with Craig Road and see where we sit with the actual numbers that are going to move us forward. And whether or not, as CAO Schmidt alluded to, if we get past this first hurdle with the grant money for Craig Road. Because if we do, I think it puts us in a much better position to think that we're going to get something down the road. What that number is going to be, I don't know. So I guess for me, I would still prefer a deferral of, maybe into February or when we might find out that there's money for Craig Road and find out about the projections with respect to the DCs. So we actually know what our financial footing is going forward. Rather than spend $200,000 and then turn around and say no down the road. Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Fisher, on this, RPF award, is there an expiration if we don't go with this one? Is it gone and we have to go back out to tender, or do we have a certain amount of time before we have to move forward with it? Director Culver?
So through you, the proposal letter does have an expiry on it. Having said that, because we're using the GPO process, the prices are fixed until they change at the GPO. So it's not, I don't know when that iteration of renewal for so they go and do that selection. If they do that, if we defer till February and they do that in December or January, I don't know what the fees will come back at that point, or even if Colliers will be the selected proponent. But again, yes, there is an expiry on any offer.
Councillor Fisher?
I agree with everything the deputy mayor just said. I think deferring it for a short period of time would be fine. I'd also like to have a projection of when we're going to start pulling permits up on Gill Road, because that would be an indication of when we're going to start seeing money come in from DCs. And just to go back to what the mayor had said before, I agree. I would actually like to have an update on a timeline for Craig Road. I think we should be updated on an ongoing basis. Now, some of it may need to be in closed session because I understand some of them are sensitive issues, but I would like to have an update for all of council so we can know exactly where we stand on it. And I think that if we were to defer this, I would like that to happen prior to coming back to this subject, because I think it's pertinent to it.
Not seeing anything further, council. I definitely will be fully supporting this. Again, I think that the information that's going to come forward from this consultant is going to provide insight as this council makes a decision to either continue with the project or not. I think that the DC component is one component of it. The actual tangible cost of it is something that we will have to consider as a whole. I think without this next step, we're going to, if we defer this, we'll get information on DCs and then we'll just need this information again. So I have heard that. So I will ask for, at this time, I believe is it a referral council that you're looking for because there was additional information required, or are you looking to just defer this until a later date? I would much prefer you to put your hand up like everyone else
Well,
and
you're
go through
looking
the chair.
around, you
Well, I'm
know.
waiting for someone to put their hand up to put a referral or deferral.
On thinking about this and the information that we've asked staff to be able to provide, although some of it might not be attainable, I would ask for a referral back to staff so that staff might be able to provide the DC information. Also provide an update on the grant application as it moves at least until December to see whether we've hit that first hurdle, and then bring it back to council. At some point, I would suggest February. That might be an appropriate time to find out whether we're getting any money from the government to help us with the project or not.
Councillor Moore?
I'd like to see a hard finish date for that. So 3 months, I'm thinking, if that gets us into February, I think that does. So, but a hard close. But also I think the delegation at Roma is a really good idea. I think that we put our projects out there and let them know where we're at and that we would appreciate some help because we are a small community, and I'd be happy to help with that. And I guess, and Director Culver too, because the more ears that hear, our ambitions, the better. And we are obligated to build Craig Road. So I feel like they should bear some of that responsibility.
So I have a referral being proposed by Deputy Mayor Cabral and seconded by Councillor Fisher. And I'm sure staff have captured. So we do have a hard date so that the motion before council be referred back to staff until February 2025, and that staff report back on the estimate development charges anticipated in the next 2 to 5 years. CEO Schmidt.
Sorry, Mayor Coughlin. You say a deferral or referral?
We have an
February?
R. We have an R in front of this one. So it would be referred, which is just more time, but more information. My question is, as Craig Road is not any part of this discussion on the agenda this evening, do you need clarification? I do believe council would like those to be part and parcel, understanding the DCs to be collected and be allocated to both projects. So inclusive of Craig Road and the project. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you. I would also ask if staff might be able to, in December, look at the debt financing piece again. Things may have changed by then. The rate may be lower. It might be a more palatable number, and how that would work in with the DCs. That would be very helpful, I think. Thank you.
Perfect. So we do have this, that the motion now before council be referred to staff until February 2025, inclusive of the Craig Road project, and that staff report back on the estimated development charges anticipated in the next 2 to 5 years. Anything further on this? Thank you, in favor of the referral. And that has carried. We will now go, nope. It's been referred. At this time, we are going to take a break. And it is 48, so if we could get back at 9 p.m. Thank you. Roma Conference. Based on our conversation for the last item, we will pull item 8 to be dealt with separately. Are there any other items 1 through 7 to be pulled? I have 2. Anything further, council? Not seeing any, so that the report items listed herein be received for information. Items 9.1 through 9.8, with the exception of 2 and 8. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to item number 2, as pulled by Councillor Thompson, the 2024 advertising summary, and looking for a seconder for this, please. I have Councillor Garwood. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. First of all, I want to thank Officer Odette for her report. Great information in there for me, and also would like to compliment her on our new mobile app. I've got a great deal of confidence in our communications team, and I think they're doing a great job for our municipality. After reading her report, I see it would just add more work for her, and it would be very difficult for our staff to do the 25% criteria with all the different caveats around that. So I'd like to modify my previous motion and present a new motion and take the 25% out. Mayor Coughlin, could I share that now?
Please.
So whereas the government mandated that its top agencies spend 25% of its advertising dollars with Ontario publishers, and whereas the Township of Springwater commends the provincial government for taking the initiative to ensure government spending support Ontario businesses, and whereas the township would like to show its support for this initiative, and further that staff be authorized to distribute the advertising budget as they deem most beneficial. And so just after reading her report and seeing the great job that they did on our mobile app, seeing the great job that they did in communicating our celebration this summer, I would like to put the budget back in their hands and see what they can do for us and with regards to communication within our township.
Okay, so Councillor Thompson has an amendment before us. I will open it up to the floor to the original motion first, and then I will look for a seconder for the amendment. So Councillor, are there any comments or questions on the original report? Councillor Alexander?
I just have a process question because I thought we were just receiving an information report, so I'm struggling with now a new motion on the table.
And I will defer back over to our deputy clerk for the procedural.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Councillor Alexander is correct. There's the motion on the floor is that the report listed herein be received for information, the 2024 advertising summary report. Councillor Thompson, I believe, is going to be tabling an amendment to just add that staff be authorized to distribute the advertising budget as deemed most beneficial.
And I will go back. So there typically is information. So often we'll get letter for communication and then we put it on the floor to support it, or we have a delegation to be received, and often it's the school groups or the food bank or whichever it is. So this would be a similar process to that. Councillor Thompson.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I understood that this information report was requested because of my original motion. And so now that we have the information, we do have the ability to make a decision whether we're gonna move forward or not move forward with the motion. And the amendment to my motion simply was because it would be too difficult for them to identify local businesses that would qualify for the government's recommendation under the 25%. And because it would create, I think, too much work for staff, just to eliminate that caveat and to take this budget that's identified in her report, I think it's $40,000 in 2025, and let them use it as how they deem fit. Let them do their job, the job that they're trained for, the job that they're paid for.
Thank you for that. Councillor Alexander.
Okay, so just for clarification, and I don't think I disagree with that. We're essentially going back to where we were before the original motion was on the table. We're not looking at moving in a new direction.
Counselor Thompson.
Well, yeah, we had allocated, if you read the report, we had allocated last in 2024 about $60,000 to a direct mail flyer. We had dictated to staff, this is what they were to do. The report came back that next year they're going to do 12 additions of on a budget of $40,000. And my recommendation is that we don't dictate to staff as to how they spend the money, but they have the budget and they can use it as they deem fit. As they deem is the best way to communicate with our residents.
Counselor Alexander.
Okay, so then and nothing against staff, because I have no idea which direction you'd go in, but from what you're saying, I think I would have an issue with that, because then that would be able to say, they could make the decision that they don't want to do the direct mailer. They could make the decision that they don't like the app and we could get rid of the app. And I think those are decisions that have had lengthy discussion at this table, and it is our duty to provide direction there. So if that's where we're going with this, then no, I can't support that.
Counselor Thompson.
Just to clarify, all we're talking about is the $40,000 that's allocated to the direct mail flyer. This has nothing to do with the app, which is terrific, which our residents love, and our communications team has done a fantastic job on.
So, Counselor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And thank you, Councillor Thompson, for bringing this forward. I know this conversation has been lengthy at this table over multiple years. I've been very blunt in regards to my concern still to this date around a direct mailer. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not the correct option in moderation. So I do support Councillor Thompson's option in regards to putting this over to staff. I would assume that staff would not do away with one form of communication or the other, but diversify our portfolio and utilize the expertise that our communication staff has that I don't believe members of this council have. And I could be wrong. If somebody up here has that background, please call me out on it and I will apologize. But I do not have that experience, and I know when to listen to experts. We often ask for expert advice, so I think we should utilize our incredible communications team, which continues to do a lot with a little in my mind. So I'm not going to get into the specifics as to saying that we should spend money with the Springwater News or one specific organization or the next. Councillor Thompson, at the last meeting or when this was initially brought forward, provided a list of different publications and options. Some are focused to different communities like the agricultural community and whatnot, that are options for the municipality to again diversify its portfolio in regards to communication. I'm not sure why we are so focused on only having one avenue. When you look at Officer Audette's report, which I would say was very well done, and I learned a lot, and thank you for answering my questions, Officer Audette. It provides an excellent breakdown in regards to exactly where we spend our dollars. And we can see a significant portion, I believe it was over 90% of the funds that we have available to us were spent on a piece of paper that gets sent to people's mailboxes. Beyond that, and beyond various different human resources recruitment advertising, which again is not advertising to our residents, or statutory requirements for various different open houses or planning matters, there's not much left on the list. And we continue to hear from our residents that they want more information. And we all talk to different people. I'm not claiming that one talks to more the next, but the folks that I'm speaking with and the feedback that I'm receiving is that the direct mailer comes in. While it looks fantastic and staff put a ton of time and effort into it, it often goes to the blue bin not too far after that. And that's a shame, because there is excellent information on there. Sometimes, again, we've talked about it, that information is outdated by the time that it hits our doorsteps as well. So I'm not here to rehash the past. I'm not here to talk about the Springwater News. I'm not here to talk about paper weight and color of ink. I just want to see us look at other options beyond a direct mailer. And that doesn't mean we go away with it. If it works for some folks, that's great. But who's to say we can't look at some alternatives, put the ability to make these decisions in staff's hands? I see this as an operational matter. We're not talking about buying an app. We've done that. We're not talking about fully getting rid of one thing or the next. Just looking at some different options out there.
Councillor Fisher and then Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Garwood, the argument that the mailer makes it into the blue bin, but a local paper doesn't, it's getting old, right? If the people truly want information, as you say, and they do, they would read it just as much as they would the paper. And I think it's targeted. I think it also makes it into everyone's hands. So the mailer has been successful. And I say we continue with it, but handing over the budget just to be run by a department, no, I can't agree with it. So.
Councillor Thompson?
So if you look at the report and read the report, which again, Officer Adet, thank you, you did a great job. I am going to talk about the local paper, which the province is encouraging us to advertise in. In fact, they mandated on statutory notices. You'll see that there are two of them in the report that the province required us to put in the paper because we know that people are reading them. We have no evidence that the direct mail flyer works, but we have lots of evidence that the local publications work. Again, the province says 4 to 5 people on a weekly basis get their information from the local paper. But for me, I'm a taxpayer in Springwater. This is about using my tax dollars to the best benefit. We're going to save money. If you look in that report, these flyers, the direct per issue is $3,200. The same amount of advertising on our local paper was $1,100 for that full page ad, which is exactly the same amount of advertising that is on that direct mail flyer. If you look at the rate sheets, if you actually read the paper, if you do 4, you get a 10% discount on that. So that would reduce the cost even more. And if you do commit for a year, it gets that cost to about $935. So what, like it's less than a third of, you could do 3 times as much advertising in a better mode of advertising. So this does not make any, as a taxpayer, this makes no sense to me at all. Putting or giving back the responsibility of advertising to our team, which really it should have been in the first place. We shouldn't be dictating how staff does that. It takes the politics out of the equation. The optics of going to a direct mail flyer for me has been bad from the beginning. My attitude is, if we don't like what's being printed about ourselves, we shouldn't try to censor or silence the media. We should simply do a better job. And so I'm asking for your support in this motion to let staff do their job, the job that they are trained for, the job that they are paid to do. And Mayor Coughlin, I'd like to call the vote.
And thank you. There are a couple of members that have not had an opportunity to speak yet, including myself. I'm not entirely sure how print media has become such a controversial issue at this table, but there seems to be heels dug in on one side or the other. And this isn't a political side point for me, and I would agree with both Councillors Fisher and Garwood that sometimes a paper ends up in the recycling bin and sometimes the direct mailer does. I'm going to agree that all of our residents choose to receive their information in many different forms, and I think it's our responsibility to provide all forums possible. The app, online, social media, the paper, and the direct mailer. And I think that us removing one of those options is excluding some residents. Whether we fully agree with the paper or not, or whether we fully agree with the direct mailer, I think that by incorporating all forms of media, we have a better chance to reach all of our residents. So I will support putting it back to our staff, as it has been for many, many years prior. But again, I don't want this conversation to become political. I have the vote called. I have not yet heard from Deputy Cabral or Councillor Moore if they wish to speak before the vote. Counselor Moore.
Thank you. Going back to the report, it does say in conclusion, in the absence of the QCJO list, staff cannot formulate a proposed budget reallocating the 25% of the direct mail budget to Ontario publishers, which was the original ask. Should council wish to adopt a mandate similar to the provincial approach, staff could be directed to further investigate potential qualifying publishers by contacting the current township utilized publishers, etc. My question is, because we are mandated already, know what it would
Sorry,
be.
just your microphone.
Sorry, I don't know what it would be that staff would be putting more in the Springwater News as opposed to what is being done already, and that the direct mailer is not providing. I'm not quite sure what we would be achieving.
Thank you for that. And your cell phone is just interrupting with the. I think that while I would agree that there is planning acts that do have a portion that is in the paper, there are things like our summer camp programs and things that are just not in the paper, advertising different services that we might add. So I think that is the difference that we're looking for there. Deputy Cabral, I can turn to you for comment.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I don't have a comment. I think the system's working fine, and to suggest that this council hasn't directed certain things to happen with respect to advertising would be a misnomer. It's always come before council on more than one occasion, whether it be the Barrie Advance or the Springwater News. That was one of the reasons why the direct mailer kind of came to floated to the top, and every household in Springwater Township gets that direct mailer. And I would also suggest that I've seen them come to the house where it's not a single page on both sides, but it's 4 pages with a ton of information in it. And I, for one, read it all the time. And I've got some folks who tell me that they love it. Some folks love print media too. Hopefully, print media will come back stronger again. But I just don't want to have this discussion ongoing all the time.
Thank you. And the vote has been called. So we are now voting on the amendment that's been, I need a seconder for the amendment, please. I have Councillor Garwood. Is this on the process, Councillor Garwood? Not a comment. Process?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just 2 items. One, can you please read the amendment again? And second, please, I'd like a recorded vote.
This is on the amendment provided by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Garwood, and I would ask Deputy Clerk Marshall to read, please.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. The amendment would read to add, whereas the Ontario government has mandated that its top agencies being the LCBO, Ontario Cannabis Stores, Metrolinx, and Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corp spend 25% of its advertising dollars with Ontario publishers, and whereas the Township of Springwater commends the provincial government for taking the initiative to ensure government spending supports Ontario businesses, and whereas the Township would like to show its support for this initiative, be it therefore resolved that staff be authorized to distribute the advertising budget as they deem most beneficial. And Councillor Garwood has called a recorded vote. So when I say your name, please state yes or no. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Garwood.
Yes.
Councillor Alexander.
No.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Moore.
No.
Councillor Fisher.
Nope.
Mayor Coughlin.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Cabral.
No.
So Council, we are back to the main motion, which is to receive the report for information. I have that moved and seconded. Unless there's any further amendments or redirection, we would just be simply receiving it at this time.
Ask for a recorded vote, please.
On receiving the, okay.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So the A recorded vote has been called on the motion that reads as follows, that the report listed herein be received for information, the 2024 advertising summary. When I call your name, please state your vote, yes or no. Councillor Garwood,
Yes.
Councillor Alexander,
Yes.
Councillor Thompson,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Fisher,
Yes.
Mayor Coughlin,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cabral.
Yes.
And now we move on to item 8 for our information reports, which is the ministerial delegations. And this was subsequent to conversation earlier this evening. And at this time, I would just look for a mover and seconder for this, please. I have Deputy Cabral and Councillor Garwood. I can open this up if there's any suggestion. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I did speak with the clerk during the break, and I can do this tomorrow. I'll send an email, and that's sufficient.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any additional items for consideration? We do have a deadline in there that we can adhere to, but nothing further at this time. All those in favor? And that has carried. We'll now move on to our verbal reports, and I will call on Director Herron.
Thank you, Your Worship. In discussion with the manager of Engineering and Public Works, I can report that there's no significant changes from what was reported at the last council meeting.
Thank you, and I will now call on Deputy Mayor Cabral for the county update.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin.
Oh, my
Oh,
apologies.
sorry.
My apologies.
I
Councillor Thompson.
apologize.
I just have a question for Director Herron regarding updates. So we had a really strong conversation on Craig Road just a few minutes ago, or maybe an hour ago. Just with regards to updates, are there anything that you can do right now that would make this go quicker or move this project up? Or in your opinion, have we done everything? Are we doing everything that's going to make this happen as quick as possible?
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson, as I did earlier ask for an update on that, and CO Schmidt did come to me during the break and requested that we provided staff with some time to bring that report forward, and they will bring the update and the report forward at a later date. Deputy Mayor Cabral.
Back on. Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. County update. There was very lively debate regarding the composition of Simcoe County Council, which currently stands at 32 members, including the warden. The report on the agenda from the Governance Committee workshop follow-up recommended that County Council support an option to pursue a full-time warden, basically formulating a 17-member council, so 16 members, one from each municipality, and a full-time warden. Much discussion took place on the matter, rather lively discussion, I might add, and County Council eventually voted to keep the 32-member council composition with 2 councillors from each of the 16 municipalities and add a full-time warden to bring the total to 33 from 32. So, can I say how we voted, Mayor Coughlin?
I would like, if we could ask for it to be recorded again, that would be great.
We voted for the smaller size, but it's actually gotten larger to 33. County Council received also a report outlining age-friendly wellness program grant. This report provided information on grant received for the County of Simcoe's age-friendly wellness program in June of this year, and the amount was just shy of $15,000, and the Government of Ontario came through with that money. And it's for the 2024-25 Senior Community Grant Program funds. The funding was to support a community program that will reduce social isolation for our seniors and improve mental health and overall well-being for our older adults living in Simcoe County. The grant was used by staff to develop and implement a series of social activities for seniors in the community, offered at both Georgian Village in Penetanguishene, Simcoe Village in Beaton, and these social events run from August through to the end of October. County Council also received updates on the new Lynx transit route for 2025. They'll be implementing a Route 7, which will provide a north-south transit corridor to service Bradford, West Gwillimbury, Innisfil, and the City of Barrie area. The update also sought support to proceed with an RFP to evaluate transit services delivery models and determine what best accommodates the needs of the County of Simcoe. The Lynx transit system has been operational for 5 years and has been widely successful, with ridership surpassing expectations, and despite the pandemic, and this was very interesting, recently surpassed the 1 million rider mark. There will be a review of service delivery levels, operational models to respond to current and future needs that will include significant stakeholder consultation. Through the preparation of the Simcoe County's recent transportation master plan, considerable feedback was received regarding transit, and more specifically for the county to explore opportunities to consolidate transit services on a regional scale to align with 5 key themes. One of them was connectivity and coordination, and that was to try and provide coordination with local municipalities for better connections and scheduling, fare integration to review regional transit models and fare policies and explore technologies that and products that would provide integration of fares. Accessibility, this was important, especially for our senior component and those with mobility challenges. Improving accessibility through accessible bus stops for traditional fixed routes and expanded specialized transit. The other one here was they were looking at sustainable infrastructure and vehicles, looking at fleet renewal with more efficient and or electric vehicles. So that was good news for the Lynx. They were also in the report spoke about expanding the service in a more timely fashion to provide more frequent service, expanding the routes, and in particular, one that I found very interesting was to try and expand the service into Saturdays and Sundays, which I think would benefit our community and certainly our student population to enable them to work in other locations other than, say, Elmvale or Minising or something. They can get down to Barrie and take up opportunity with part-time jobs. So that's it.
And thank you. And yeah. I just wanted to speak to the vote that happened on this. So the process moving forward is now that the vote at county council will now come back to the lower tier municipalities, and it will require a 2/3 majority. I haven't seen it come, the communication was directed to come to the lower tier municipality. I think it would be advantageous of us to have it on an agenda prior to being requested for the vote so that we can have wholesome understanding and debate, and also to engage our community, because this will inevitably impact them. Once our municipality has voted on that, it'll go back for ratification, and then at that point, it'll still require ministerial consent. So it has to pass us, and then has to make its way through a government that has been reducing the size of councils, not making them bigger. So that'll be interesting to see how this exercise all plays out. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I just had a quick question about the Lynx bus. Are they expanding the service on Saturdays and Sundays to RVH as well? Do you know?
When they do that,
Yeah.
my expectation would be that that Saturday, Sunday on the more prevalent routes, that's what I was kind of gleaning from the report. It's one piece that I spoke about there. And certainly if they're going to expand it to Saturday and Sunday, I mean, the route that goes up 27 and into RVH will.
I don't mean to be so
definitely, I would think,
specific.
yes. But that's not happening right away.
Right. Okay. And is the ridership picked up like they were hoping? Good.
Yeah, that was through the pandemic, the 5 years there. So
Right.
they've hit the million, and they're adding this new route, did I say Route 7 from Bradford, West Gwillimbury up to Barrie. So they're really working pretty hard, and that's the whole idea behind the service delivery review and looking at the transit and seeing when they can implement these expansions and changes. So it's a really good report.
No, it's great because our appointments at RVH are booking, Saturdays and Sundays and through the nights and all crazy hours. Everything's running 24 hours now. So that's good to know. Thank you.
On top of the addition, it was also about an amalgamation of existing municipal transits. So all the internal municipal transits, what it would look like if there was just to be one larger system across the entire county. So that's also going to be form part of the review. We can now move on to our municipal updates, and I'll start on this side. Councillor Thompson.
Well, I'd first like to talk about the Fall Fair. What an amazing event. For the first time, I was able to have 4 generations of my family at the Fall Fair. Also, for the first time, my grandson marched in the parade as a Trojan. So that was really fun for him and for our family. The Fall Fair continues to be the largest event in our township. I just want to thank the Fair Board for their tireless work and keeping this important tradition going in our community. Would also like to recognize one of our own, Councillor Garwood, who wore several hats during the fair. He also serves as the 2nd vice president of the Fair Board. And I know that the long weekend was a really long weekend for him and his family and the Fair Board. So again, a great job and thank you. Would also like to thank our staff, our volunteer firefighters, and our library staff for their contribution to the fair. I know that the photo booth that our staff ran was a big success, as was the prize wheel that the library ran for the kids. Speaking of our library, as you know, the Springwater Public Library has been the recipient of multiple awards and accolades, including the National Award for their summer reading program. Their hard work has not got unnoticed. I am thrilled to announce that the Springwater Public Library has been invited to speak at the upcoming Ontario Library Super Conference, February 1st, 2025. Board Chair Adrian Graham and Library Board CEO Jody Player Delgado have been asked to present to conference members on good library board governance. This is a significant achievement considering there are more than 260 public libraries across library boards across the province, and the organizers of the conference reached out to Springwater directly to share their model of governance. Congratulations to our CEO and library board for a job well done and for this recognition.
Putting down this, Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm first going to start with seems like every couple months we have a blood drive in Elmvale. So the Canadian Blood Services will be in Elmvale on October the 19th from 10 to 2 at the community hall. That's an important one. And if you can go and give, it's very important. And of course, I'm going to speak about the Fall Fair. Last weekend, October 11th and 12th, was the 162nd Elmvale Fall Fair. It couldn't have gone better, in my opinion. We had 2 incredible days of weather, which definitely helps. We had 2,200 kids participate on Friday in the school parade. And really what it comes down to is the volunteers that make the fair go around each year. So I personally want to reach out to not only those that sit on the fair board and do those jobs, but it's the folks that work the front gate, it's the folks that pick the garbage up, it's the folks that, everything in between. It takes hundreds of people to make an event like that possible, whether that be year round or at the actual fair itself. I also want to give a special shout out to Springwater staff. Putting my other hat on, I know Springwater staff, as they always do, went above and beyond to ensure the fair success. So Manager Dean and your team and the outside guys and gals as well, thank you so much for everything that you do and ensuring that the fair continues each year. There'll be more to come in regards to total numbers and whatnot of the fair, but it was a special weekend as it always was, and I appreciate everyone's support.
I was waiting for Councillor Alexander to give the Go Rowdies, who happen to have won the fair this year. So not only in float building, but second in cheering, which gave us the gold medal. So tell your grandson apologies on his Trojan loss. But no, I'd also like to I found it to be quite I don't even know what the word is for it, but I ran into our new or not so new director at the fair on both days. And I just thought it was, there's one way to learn something and a hands-on approach to being at the fair, but not just being there, but when I left on Saturday night when the lights were coming on after the dance, you were still there with your team. So when we're talking about hours, it is long, long hours of hard work. So thank you so much for diving in and to coming in and feeling what it is and why it is that we invest so much into that, because I'm sure as an outsider, why we would take ice in and out at that expense might be foreign to some, but once you're there and you see how it brings a community together, it's something you can't explain or write in a report. So thank you for your efforts in being there, and I hope we didn't disappoint. Is there anything further for municipal updates? We will move on. Notices of motion. Councillor, are there any notices of motion this evening? Councillor Moore.
Sorry, I should back up though to the updates, because I don't think we'll meet before the 30th of October, or will we? I just want to put it out there that I have asked council to attend a tour of the Grenfell Hall on October the 30th and the renovation, as well as the I'll never say this correctly. The Dadwin lookout. And so I'm hoping everybody can join us. I know Councillor Thompson will be away, but that's very exciting. And I'm wondering if after that, we can maybe even figure out a day to invite the public.
Thank you for that. And General Manager Elliott the county did say that it is now open to the public. The gates have been removed and it's completely open to the public. So I'm hoping that we can all enjoy the wind at Dadwin. Yes. But yes, I look forward to that, and thank you very much for the invite. Councillor, are there any notices of motion this evening? Not seeing any. Do we have any items for future consideration? And again, now we'll move on to our bylaws. May I have a mover and seconder for the bylaws, please? Councillors Fisher and Moore, and noting that Councillor Alexander did call conflict on 8.8, it would then, I would assume on 0.85. So again, conflict for Councillor Alexander, so that the bylaws listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. 2024-083 road naming Midhurst Heights Street E bylaw. 2024-084 amendment to development charges bylaw, and 2024-085 student wage grid bylaw. Any questions on these? All those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw, please? I have Councillors Thompson and Moore. That bylaw 2024-086 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on October 16th, 2024, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And a motion to adjourn. I have Councillors Garwood and Deputy Cabral, that the regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 9:38 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on November 6, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you.